Okay, so like a
fluffy waffle
fluffy,
type.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you say like doughy, you don't mean like a deer, a female deer.
No, they're too fast. But I mean, I could show you.
Oh, you really did come prepared.
Because I realized this times up really well with my second dinner.
So you're like a hobbit.
Yeah, you just need to eat bits and bites, I guess.
Oh, bad.
And I guess
that's
now
that's derailed everything now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also instead of Steve being the one, I also certainly have to sort of contain myself and not be running the show because it's not my show today.
It's not.
I mean, in fairness, we are generally only about 2/3 focused anyway.
Each of you.
Yeah. I suppose the three of us are fools with tools, so technically we can just host all of the podcasts at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that there's enough foolish things going on with tools around us on a normal basis.
Generally, yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, I think that sums up most days, really. Certainly there's tools around. They don't necessarily get used, certainly not in this house. Unless you count a pencil.
Just collect them as well, Andy.
Yeah, definitely. I think actually I'm. In Marvel you got that character, the Collector.
Yeah.
I think I could take that role because collections. If there's one thing common to things I have done across my life, it's collect. Yeah, stamp collection. Yeah, I got just up there on the shelf there, green foil. That's some of my stamp collection. There are thousands of other stamps somewhere else. I forget where now, but I've got thousands of stamps. I used to collect postcards, interesting postcards. I've still got a few. Tools, books, calculators. We talked about that earlier. There are so many things that I have collected over the years. It seems to be the common thing. Skills, yeah, I think, yeah.
But
yeah,
when it comes to the calculators, do you? I sort of have collected them sort of through the ages, starting with just someone's severed hand and going to abacus and then the fancy Texas sinus.
Definitely through the ages. I still have both of my first two scientific calculators, which I had before I think both of you were born.
Doesn't surprise me.
No.
I mean,
definitely before you were born,
like
Rasmus,
3 days ago. So.
on Wednesday, yeah. No, well, that's a weird thing though. I never bought a calculator to use in school because it was like 100 quid or something, at least here in Norway. And I was like, that sounds like bear money to me. I'll just do all of the calculations in my head, and when I reach a point where it needs to go with tangents and sinus, cosinus, and all of that, I'll just leave that blank and do everything else.
40% still a pass. It's fine.
We can learn. I mean, some of the common ones you can learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So it wasn't all that bad.
Sine 30 degrees is 0.5, and
you recognize some things.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to Japan and ran away. So it's like, it's fine. I don't need this problem anyway. So, but I need to tell you, like, going to Japan and getting told a couple of things. One, you need to choose a foreign language from the Japanese point of view to learn in school.
Okay.
And you will be at least physically present in chemistry class in Japanese. And a couple of other bits where you are like, I have no idea what's going on. I see like the shapes on the blackboard, but it's like, this is worse than Greek.
How old were you when you went to Japan?
17.
Hey, okay.
Yeah, that's my version of running away from home, I guess, because I was fucked up, tired of school in Norway, and was like, I want to do something else. And a lot of people went to the Americas, and I was like, I want to do something completely different. Japan is completely different. Yeah,
very different. Yeah.
Yeah. Not saying it's the smartest choice of my life, but it was very exciting, very interesting. But
So what you're telling us there, the subtext is that Jan needs to go to Japan for a little bit, just to complete the trio of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been working for a Japanese company for a while, but he's just not all the way there yet. But I mean, being in Japan, that was being teenager in Japan was really weird, because like already I was like the tallest guy in school or something. Which, I mean, I'm not all that tall, but I'm not Duncan. But compared,
not many people are.
Yeah, I was going to say very few people are Duncan.
True enough. But then there's the weird thing of there being 40 people in a class. I'm used to 20. But of course,
20 people in Norway.
Yeah, that's all of us. But also in the fact that the 40 people in class, like 35 of them were girls. So going over to Japan, I suddenly felt like I was in a zoo, except I was sort of inside the cage, being viewed on and prodded, which was an interesting experience.
Was it The Simpsons or Futurama where they did that?
Futurama at least did it, where Fry was kidnapped and put up somewhere.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
But Fry and Leela, and he tried
that
to
was the
go on.
episode I
Oh,
was
but we
thinking.
need to mate. We need to make something interesting. We need to keep the human race going. And he said, "I'm a Cyclops, and fuck you." So I think there was somewhat of the plot of the episode.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I saw that one.
See that? I find that quite interesting. I wonder sometimes. I know a little bit about how physics is taught in America, and kind of some of the differences between kind of the American teaching of physics in detail, in things like how you might look at particular topics or not, and how there might be slight differences to what's taught. I mean, a simple one, how a resistor is drawn in electronics. So, as far as I know, I think in America they still kind of use the sort of the zigzag symbol, whereas in sort of the UK we use the kind of rectangle. We used to use zigzag, but now the rectangle. And it interests me to see kind of or think about what a science lesson might be like in somewhere like Japan. And like you say, I mean, could you recognise some of it? I mean, obviously a lot of it would have been in using Japanese characters, but
so that was one of the really interesting things, because like I couldn't actually understand anything apart from the fact that I think we were supposed to learn about crystallization in minerals of various sorts, which I mean that's about as far as I managed to get. But so the periodic table, it has a lot of like proper Japanese names, but that's like everything that was discovered before like introduction to the West. So all of the elements that was discovered after that has westernized names. So I could read those even though, and sort of recognize like, oh yeah, of course I know a lot of them from beforehand, and I know sort of where they're supposed to be in the table, so I can sort of suss out what it's supposed to be. But like,
because of course, because a lot of them are based on names as well, aren't they? So
like thorium, which is mine.
Well, yeah.
It is. It is the like. There's a couple of elements that was discovered by Norwegians, but thorium is the one I currently only remember, and it's now really important because of the thorium reactor.
Yeah, of course,
that is coming on. But there was actually like we had a proper gold rush in the south of Norway when they first discovered thorium, because they thought it was the next big thing. So there was people who in the span of 2 weeks earned nearly 10 years salary in the middle 1800s or when it was.
Wow.
Yeah, that was quite an insane time. And then, of course, so nobody realized, or everyone realized, we don't actually have the technology to use it properly yet, and then it all petered off. But it's quite a big thing. It used to be anyway.
Yeah.
So what about go back to the chemistry? What about sort of symbols? Do they use? I mean, so H for hydrogen and He for helium, etc. Do they use Japanese characters for those?
I don't recall. Because I didn't understand anything. I was just fascinated at looking at the periodic table for nearly a year, just trying to figure out what everything was called. I mean, that was difficult enough. Trying to understand everything else, like the teacher, like hardly anyone spoke English over there, and I didn't speak Japanese. I hardly managed to learn some over the last year talking with Red, having classes with Red. But I mean, apart from that, like there was some people in the class who know more and less English and all of that. So every once in a while, they would sort of give me the thing of, oh, we're trying to talk about this, and they would take 15 minutes to sort of figure out the words to make me understand what you're supposed to be talking about for the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, I forgot we've got a Westerner in here. We better give him something.
Yeah.
Keep him entertained.
But when it comes to the foreign language thing, like I could choose between French, Chinese, and German. So I ended up learning.
Taught in Japanese though as well, I'm guessing.
Yeah, but that's the funny thing. I ended up then learning almost more German than Japanese in the year I was over there, because German is a lot easier, so to speak.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, it was one of those occasions of, oh, here's a story we're supposed to read, and it's a classical German tale. I was like, oh, it's Red Riding Hood. So it's like, oh, I know all of this story. Reading it was suddenly not difficult. But of course, yeah. But, it was also a weird thing of some of them would, in the French class, would sometimes ask me like, "What's this word supposed to mean?" And it was the French version of illuminate, and I was like, "Oh, it's light." I was like, "How do you know that? It's Latin based." And they were like, "What? That's."
Of course,
how do you know so many languages? No, that's a lucky guess. That was one word that's similar across all of the European languages.
Yeah, the Romans kind of spread it about a bit. It's, you know, there's a little bit of influence everywhere, I suppose.
They never got to Norway though. They sort of reached Denmark and met those Vikings and sort of said, that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah, it's all Danes up there.
And then they saw the snow and the ice and the hills. And
I mean, the Danes are soft Vikings because it's warm down there. It's just a bit windy, and then of course they reached those, and it was like, yeah, no, these buggers, we don't want to go any further than this, and then they would reach Norway. So
anyone daft enough to still be living up there when they know that there is warmer bits down south, you know, lead them to it.
Yeah,
it's the same reason why they stopped at Hadrian's Wall, isn't it? You know, it's not that they were pushed back by military forces; just they went, yeah, the weather's a bit icy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and I mean, even then, I think like in the 800s, all of Europe was a fair bit warmer than, I guess, as warm as it is now, but not like it was 10, 15 years ago. So it was a lot milder. It was a lot better weather, relatively speaking, in the Viking Age. And then they also have these Romans that come up and go, well, fuck this shit. I mean, the Picts can have Scotland and all that because it's too mushy, too wet, too much snow, and bugger that.
Not enough of anything useful. Yeah.
Yeah. Except cheap. Their currency is still sheep based for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a large chunk of Wales as well, and that's also sheep based. And
yeah, fair enough.
You only need one source of it, don't you?
But source, yeah.
But sort of on but it's sort of on the whole empire thing. Like, I don't think Norway has ever been invaded by anyone except for the Germans. And even then, it was sort of like, Norway had spent the previous 2 decades demilitarizing the whole country so that we happened to be an easy target for them. And even then, it was a couple of weeks of fighting before they even surrendered, and they sort of took the rest of Norway.
Well, it's because you guys could still throw snowballs properly.
Yeah. Oh, you heard about that thing?
Wasn't there? Didn't you also? What was it? Was it Quisling?
Quisling. That's the name of Vidkun Quisling. Was a man who single-handedly handed over Norway to Hitler.
Yeah.
To the extent, as far as I've heard, that Norway wasn't even on the map, so to speak, for Hitler. More figuratively than literally, I think. Until Vidkun Quisling himself got down there and said, hey, we are like the prima Aryan race, and we happen to have this ridiculously long Norwegian coast. We don't have much military left. The British just put out sea mines all along our coast. The sentiment is sort of leaning towards you. And of course, we hated, and me personally, I hated Jews. He's told Hitler, and Hitler's like, that's a bloody good idea. Let's send a bit of an armada up there. And in the span of a month or something, it went from not having been on the map to having been invaded. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes from the beginning of March, Vidkun Quisling met with Hitler, and they invaded Norway on the 9th of April. So that was a bit of a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
then-
if you're gonna do it, go all in. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, it speaks to the German efficiency. I mean, they suddenly just realized, oh, we have a spare armada. Let's just use that up the Norwegian coast.
But they did have a bit of difficulties with kind of the resistance.
Oh yeah,
Were
yeah.
Probably
So
one of the most efficient.
I
effective.
can go full on history mode and give you all the things I know.
Well, waffle away.
Yeah, because I I moved this summer, but in the town I used to live in of Drøbak, they have this fortress built originally started building it in the 1600s in the middle of the fjord on an island, and it was built on purpose to defend against a fjordic naval invasion. So when the Germans invaded, all of this was reported all along the coast because our communication system and reporting up the coast was fairly good. And the word got back from Oslo towards Oscarsborg, this fortress, of saying, okay, we surrender, even before the Armada reached that fortress. The communication didn't reach General properly. So he sent out everybody to the cannons. And we're talking recruits who've been in for 10 days. He told them to man all of the cannons, load with sharp, being the properly cursing Norwegian, and they blasted down Blücher, the flagship of the German Navy, on the first attempt, on the first try, with recruits.
Nice.
And because the fjord is so narrow there, it blocked up the entire naval passage. So the rest of the Armada couldn't reach Oslo in time, which single-handedly is what made sure that the king and parliament could flee the country with the entire gold reserve of Norway and take all of that over to England.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Didn't know that one.
And so there's a movie that came out 2019, I think, called The King's No, which is specifically about these first couple of days of the war, occupation of Norway, and about the king. It's not all the way about how he flees, but about how they travel up the valleys of Norway to the central mountains, and then going out west to the fjords and catching the ship in Ålesund. But on the way there, it's all of these battles, all of the resistance that was mustered like overnight, basically, and then actually having a dialogue with the German Nazi representative, and the king being the only one who was sort of in charge of deciding whether we're surrendering or continue to resist and flee. It's a really, really fascinating movie, sort of not about the war itself, but about the pressure of being king during war and sort of how the entire society evolves around him. And even though our king has always been sort of just a galleon figure, just sort of unpolitically there, he's also like the only other 4-star general in Norway or something, 5-star general. Like he's so there's like on the top of the military chain, there's the king, and then there's one proper military official. Yeah,
I suppose he'd need to be able to promote the other general, wouldn't he?
Yeah, there's something like that.
Good
That
point.
you can't sort of just vote him onward, so to speak. You need some up here to elevate you up. I think, technically speaking, but that's pedantics. I don't care. I mean, I just think it's cool that we have a king that has been doing so many fancy things. And I mean, our king after the war, he also would be seen on the subway going up to Holmenkollen from the castle by himself with skis, paying for his ticket, because he wanted to bugger off and just be out in nature for a bit. And he would like this really famous picture of King Olav, and him being on the subway and sort of trying to push his money on the ticket controller. So sort of, no, I'm also a citizen of this country. I need to pay.
Can you imagine? Because that's a proper like ethical quandary then as well, isn't it? Because if the ticket controller doesn't take the money from the king, then he's not doing his
Disobeying
job
the king.
properly.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
he's disobeying his king because the king is demanding take my money. So it's a really interesting conundrum, yeah.
Yeah.
But to go on that chain a bit, and because of patriotism and national pride and all of that, Norway is a really, really weird country in the sense that we absolutely have no sense, or we have no actual nobility in the country, like you do and the Germans do and the French. Like, you have an organized nobility, so to speak, House of Lords in your case, I guess. We never had that, because when we were after Black Plague and sort of the fall of the Viking Empire of Norway, we went into union with Denmark and Sweden. Sweden was the clever ones for once in their entire history and buggered off early on. But we stayed under Danish rule for 400 years, which is also called the 400-year-long night in Norway. I mean, half the time it is night anyway, but it was felt a bit longer.
Pretty much.
But so during that time, all government officials spoke Danish. They were Danish, but also Denmark at the time controlled parts of what is now Germany, almost down to Hamburg, I think.
Oh.
So a lot of the government officials, so a lot of the government officials sent to Norway were actual Germans. So when it comes to being sort of like a common citizen of Norway, everyone who was in charge was foreigners, either Danish or German. Hardly any of them were actual Norwegians. So we're basically a country that since the 1400s have always been the common folk against the nobility and the people in charge. And then a couple of years, we got our constitution in 1814 when Napoleon lost. Denmark seceded Norway to Sweden. We told Swedish to fuck off, but we'll have your king for a little bit. And then 100 years later, we seceded from them as well. But so
100 years is a little bit, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, technically speaking, it was 1814 to 1905. But I mean, pedantics. Yeah. So after that, we sort of got a lot of our national pride back again and got all of that going. But that's also sort of political transition of common people in Norway then being allowed to get more and more in charge of the country, which sort of also explains why sort of the Labour Party of Norway, they're not politically, it's called the same thing. I don't think you can compare them politically, but that's other things. That's why also the Labour Party in Norway has sort of been sort of almost consecutively in charge since we got independence in 1905. It's been like recently there was muddled things going on and things got weird, but yeah, I mean, Norway's weird that way. We've never been invaded by anyone, really. We only did all of the invading of other people.
Yeah,
quite a bit. Yeah, particularly. I mean, go back 1,000 years. Yeah.
As Brits, we can't talk, Andy, because
we've invaded pretty much everyone.
We taught you well
at some point.
Out of the roughly 200 countries, we've had some sort of presence in 180 of them, about 90% of the population.
Probably,
that wouldn't surprise me.
Not 90% of the population. 90% of the countries in the world have had some sort of British people in there as a placement at some point, either through conquest or rule or political outpost.
And there's like the British Empire thing was a lot of bad stuff going on, but there's also a lot of interesting things that the Britons did well that we still see the benefits of. One example is like modern archaeology is solely based upon the efforts of the British. Because one really concrete example I know of is that when the British Empire occupied, I guess, or conquered India, they also took a lot of British officers and sent over there, and they had to go to in the sort of school over there and learn at least one language and a couple of dialects. They needed to know the history of the place they were going to serve in. They had to do all of these things to get a sort of familiar and understand the country. No one else bothered to do that before you did. Of course, you also misunderstood and misread a lot of things, but that was sort of the basis for
we were
modern
good at that as
archaeology.
well, yeah.
Yeah, but that was the basis of modern archaeology, because you actually sort of walked around and looked at things and asked questions, and you sort of pointed at the temple and saying, "What's that thing?" And they go, "It's a pile of rugs," said the locals. And then some of your officers start to ask questions, go, "Yeah, but so these symbols here, they look very similar to what we saw like a couple of 100 miles that ways." And then started to suss things together and piece things out. And the locals had forgotten all of this story because they didn't practice it, they didn't use it.
I mean, we're sort of looping back around to Andy's thing earlier about collections, but, you know, in and amongst that kind of like, you know, hey, these symbols on these rugs, we sort of, we may have inadvertently also gone, we've got some of these already that we've taken from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take some more back to the Natural History Museum. And
have you heard the story? Have you heard the story of the Greek marbles?
Possibly. I mean, you're going to have to tell it now anyway.
Yeah, so the way I remember it, this is me misremembering a lot from the podcast, the Stuff the British Stole, which in itself is brilliant.
I've subscribed to that, but I haven't listened to any yet.
Yeah. So this episode is all about all of, quote unquote, all of the statues and monuments that was on Acropolis in Athens.
Mm-hmm.
But this was during the Ottoman rule of Greece. So, of course, the Ottomans didn't care shit about what was going on there, except for the fact that they wanted a cut of whatever was going on, because politicians are always corrupt. That's not the Ottomans being corrupt or the Turks, that is politicians, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. Which is so true.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, politician, the word, it's Greek origin, isn't it? You know, poly being, you know, many, and ticks being the little blood-sucking parasites.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. That's good. That's really good. I need to steal that.
I mean, I totally stole it from somewhere else. So.
Yeah, I know. I know you're not that smart. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just good at repeating things.
But so the British was in the habit at this point at collecting things. This was after they started all of the excavations in Egypt and all of that. So they was very much in the habit of collecting things, and they thought, like the imperialist races that your people used to be / are, all of these savages don't know how to care for things, and they don't care about the history. Look at all the buildings that's fallen apart. Let us take care of it and like protect it over in the British museums in London and all that. So it's one single person who went down there. I don't recall his name, but he went down there.
Elgin, I think.
Could be. And did all of sort of the patronizing of the local officials in Athens and bribing them and all of that, until suddenly he got a royal decree in his back from the UK saying like he is supposed to be allowed to all of this, and then he took that, sort of skipped a couple of chains and got the same thing from the Ottoman Sultan or something, or whoever was in charge of Athens, like pretty far high up. And it was basically, he got just a reply of, okay, none of our people will stop you. We don't allow you to do anything, but we won't stop you. And then, of course, he just took that and ran with it. And he literally just got a gang of people with hacksaws, climbed up the Acropolis and started dismantling willy-nilly. And half the stuff they wanted to grab, it fell down and cracked. And then they shipped those off to sea because railways weren't all that big yet. And I think 90% of all those ships sank in one storm. So that's a fun tale.
Yeah, it's colourful, really, but it's also pretty horrible. Yeah, we did. Yeah, the British. Yeah, Yeah, not a good lot, really. We had some great fancies. I mean, we've done a lot of good, but we've also did a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you have that big wheel going on in the middle of London. That's kind of fun. Or did you think of something else? Do you have something else in mind?
We've got a nice collection of things that we've taken from other places. That's nice. Nice to look at.
We've got some great museums. Yeah, some of the best in the world.
I mean, there's a reason the podcast is not going to run the stuff the British stole. It's a reason that podcast is not going to run out of material for a couple of years yet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a long list.
Oh, they also had an episode that might be the most recent one, or maybe it was the previous one that just came out, a new one, about the dodo.
Yeah, I think that was someone was talking about that the other day.
Yeah.
Probably you.
No, I don't
No,
think
it might
so.
have been Simon. I don't
Could
know.
be, because
I've
I
slept
also
since then.
recommended this to him, and he was like, "Oh, that sounds like fun."
Yeah.
We were utter bastards. I think that's his exact words.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, but that's also the fun thing of like, oh, here's a really, really fun, dumb, weird bird. Let's bring it
Yeah.
back to England. And there's like one survived. It was on a sideshow for a couple of years, and then it died, and it kept being on the sideshow, and it kept rotting. So at some point, they thought, oh, maybe we should preserve this rotting bit of bird. So they gave it to the British Museum, and now apparently they figured out that, oh, it looks like it got shot in the back of the head. I was like, how does this happen? Like, half the bird is like mummified and preserved, the other half is skeleton. It's a really weird thing now, apparently. And it has pellets in the back of its head that apparently looks a lot on the spectrographs and all that to be bled from bullets. So it's like, was it dying when they shot it? Was someone drunk when they shot it? Was it just
You shot
annoying in the
after
night?
it was dead.
Could be. I mean,
It's dead now. It's using its target practice.
Oh, it is worrying how accurate that could be.
Yeah.
Well, I was at a friend over the weekend, and we were watching Drunk History, which, if you've never seen it, is amazing. We're watching the UK version, and the premise is that they get a comedian absolutely smashed, super drunk, and then get that comedian on camera to explain a particular story from history.
oh, okay.
And what they also do is, as part of the dramatization of them explaining the story, is they get a load of other comedy actors and they act out the scenes using dubbed stuff from these comedians being drunk. It's phenomenal.
Ooh.
It is just like proper, doubled over belly laughs, because they'll be trying to act the scene out, but mimicking everything that the other person's saying. So where they're stuttering, or where they stumble over their words, or slur their speech, or burst out in fits of laughter, the actors will do that in their version of it as well. It's beautiful. But we were watching one about Scott of the Antarctic, and how that whole complete
Ha! Oh, you know who we lost to?
stupidity.
Yeah, a Norwegian.
Exactly. Lost to someone else.
That's another
quite
story I
used to
can
the
tell.
cold. Yeah. But it was just the stupidity of like, no, we need to make a detour and get a load of penguin eggs for research, because that might be a good idea. And then on the way back, after realizing they'd lost, it's like, no, let's keep carrying the very obviously dead penguin eggs. But let's also go on another detour and collect 36 kilos of rocks and bring them back.
Wait,
And then they,
really?
yeah,
I never heard that part of the story before.
Yeah, they're basically on the way back. They decided to just bring a load of rocks with them. They got 11
Good job,
kilometers
Britain.
away from where they were going, and then basically that was when they just went, yeah, let's just stop. Didn't bother trying to do anything with the eggs. Just still kept them in the rucksack, and didn't bother chucking the rocks away. Just kept the rocks. So when they were found, they basically just had eggs and rocks. But those rocks actually showed that continental drift and the original Pangea and that kind of thing. So it was good research. It's just that they stopped 11 kilometers away from home, or not from home, but from where they were going, and just basically gave up.
Well, I mean, I haven't heard the whole thing about them just sort of, oh, we lost the race, let us do at least something, and then dying possibly because of that.
Well, I mean, you're only going to hear the winning story anyway about the Dane getting there first, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, we were first to the North Pole and first to the South Pole. I mean, what more do you need?
I mean, it's cold. Send the people who live in the cold. It's just sensible thinking.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to be there, but come on, we are used to it at least.
True.
Dude, you can move out of there anytime you like.
Yeah, but we have the Gulf Stream. It's actually quite pleasant.
Get into positive figures occasionally.
Yeah. I mean, we had -10 last week, and we're expecting +5 on Tuesday or something. So that's global warming being funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the climate emergency is great for everyone.
Ish. There's something about the Maldives having a sinking feeling, but
I remember reading an article years ago about there's a town in Siberia. The average temperature for the year is -20 Celsius. At times it reaches -60.
That's
it's
cold.
literally so cold you go out and it's kind of like, if you're not wearing a full set of protective gear, you freeze. Your bones feel it. It's so cold. But apparently 2 weeks of the year it reaches +30.
Ooh.
And the whole town stinks because so much stuff dies. Animals and things dies the rest of the year. It's so cold and they're frozen solid. And then it hits +30 for this 2 weeks and everything falls out really quickly and rots really quickly and just stinks like anything.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And it's just and then it disappears because it's freezing again within a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, sort of to be fair, like Norway, if you sort of look on Norway or Oslo, Stockholm, Helsinki, and Moscow, all of them are sort of on the same line. There's a little bit of wobbling going on, but it's more or less on the same latitude. But if you see the average temperature of each city, it drops by like 3 degrees going further towards Siberia. And that's because of the Gulf Stream. So Norway is sort of the most pleasant of the Nordic countries because it's fairly warm here. Going to Sweden is like, it's okay, a bit less so. South is okay. It's more south than Norway is. But then Finland is just like, no, it's just vodka and sauna if you want to survive. And then you go to Russia and it's only vodka, which sounds really depressing.
That's because the sauna's completely frozen.
Well, then you don't fire enough. Come on, you heat.
Well, so talking of fire, I think that place you're talking about is I've seen these vehicles that basically drive around. It's just like a massive diesel generator on the back of a van, basically, with 3 huge hoses, and they basically run 2 hoses into the engine bay, and then one in through your window to thaw your car out. So it takes about 45 minutes or so to warm the engine up enough so that the diesel is actually liquid again. So it will flow around the vehicle. And they do the same thing, sort of like lighting fires under the oil pan and things like that to try and melt it down again. And it's just,
I mean,
lunacy.
So you will probably feel your winters as being as cold as I feel our winters are.
Yeah, I mean that's the same thing. Like my South African friend, he feels our summers like his winters from South Africa. Yeah, but I'm talking more in the sense of what you're used to, but also what exactly that
your society is built for. Like,
yes,
the entirety of the UK shuts down if you see like 3 grams of snow in one place.
Yeah.
Whereas in Norway, it's more like, oh, we had 20 centimeters come down in 12 hours. It's a little bit of a problem, but we'll get it sorted out in a second.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that's like, we have the equipment we're used to. Is like, it snows all the time here. We can literally have snow at any point during the entirety of the year.
But that
it's
does
less
point,
likely
though,
the south during summer. But
because that is such a common occurrence for you guys, that is something that you guys are prepared for. And when you look at warmer climates that are much more adapted to being warmer climates, when they get snow, the economy shuts down.
Yeah.
Whereas that's one thing that UK is kind of reasonably all right at, is because the weather's so varied quite often. We're shit at all of it.
Yeah. I'm not
We
going to
can't
argue against
function
that.
if it rains. We can't function if it's sunny. We can't function if there's a couple of leaves on the track on the train tracks. There's a little bit of snow, a little bit of slush.
Oh.
No one knows how to drive in any weather.
But at least you have trains and roads and all that going in all kinds of directions all the time.
True.
They don't always get there on time, but they all go there eventually.
Vaguely in the same day, usually.
Yeah. But I also heard actually that like the UK now has like maybe a third of the railroad tracks that it used to in operation.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
Or
surprise
something
me, yeah.
ridiculous like that. And if you look at a map, it's still like everywhere.
Yeah, there used to be lots more, and then there were closures under the care of a certain Dr. Beeching that took. And they literally, like you said, there were railways everywhere. And if the more you kind of wander around, the more places you go, you see these kind of places. Oh, this is rather this is a rather nice wide flat footpath with a very gentle grade. Oh, and then you look back and you're like, oh yeah, 100 years ago it was a railway. And you can see the signs for it, and they were literally everywhere. And gone. Yeah, lots of them went. It's a shame. It was not necessarily a great move. I mean,
but how much it's swings and
It's-
roundabouts,
yeah,
isn't it,
it's-
for the way
yes, it
industry's
is.
moving?
yes, it is. And the thing is, I think the UK is going to have to adapt. Because with climate change, I mean, we're on the same latitude as Canada, and pretty much similar to you guys as well. But we get much more of the Gulf Stream.
Norway starts about where Scotland ends, just to give you a reference point.
Yeah, because of that curve. But if the Gulf Stream gets more messed up, because it is changing.
Yeah.
The ocean salinity is changing, things like that. As the ice caps melt, that's going to change the salinity again. That's going to shift the Gulf Stream. The UK is going to get a lot colder in winter, and we will have to actually kind of develop the skills and have things like it's just crazy things like in Germany, in Scandinavia, it's the law to have winter tires.
Winter tires, yeah.
When it's from October onwards. Is there a date?
Yeah, thereabout. No, yeah, thereabout.
Yeah, so October through to
predictable
say
weather, though, isn't it?
kind of sort of March, April, you've got to have winter tires on. The
No,
UK,
actually,
there's no
we don't-
requirement.
We don't actually have a law that says anything specific when it comes to time, because we have had mountain passes closed due to excessive snowfall in the middle of summer. I've had snow. I've had more summers with snowball fights than without it through my life. Of course, it helps that I go up to the mountains and look for snow to have a snowball fight.
Yeah.
And
That
one
definitely sounds like
scout-
more of a you problem than a Norway problem.
Let's not mix things up too much. But like when we had a scout jamboree in Stavanger in 2013, we had 3 truckloads of snow delivered, and it was like cheap. But when it comes to the whole summer tires thing, because of we can have snow all the time, so to speak, the law is more like you need to have the vehicle prepared for the condition you're going to drive on.
Yeah.
So if you have been stupid, you're at fault.
Yeah.
You should have checked the forecast. You should have talked to locals. You should have done your research and figured out that, is there a fair chance of shit hitting the fan? And it's like, worst case, you'll have chains. We have a lot of chains that you can fit on a normal personal vehicle. So a lot of people have that in their car because they needed to get to their cabin during winter, for example. Or just because the roads are horrible during melty seasons and all that. It's nice things to have.
I love that would be we've got freezy white season, we've got melty season, we've got brown droppy season.
and then there's the darker and wet season. because the whole weird axle of spinning of the planet, so sort of the winter season starts a lot earlier than winter reaches us because of the Gulf Stream and all of that.
Sense, yeah.
So it's nearly as dark as it will ever get where I live now. I mean, we are down to 6 hours of sunlight currently That's the sort of the maximum,
Wow.
the minimum we'll ever reach at Christmas Eve or something, or winter solstice. But it hasn't yet gotten all that cold because of the Gulf Stream heating up the air and the mountains and everything.
Yeah.
So proper winter, the coldest temperature are in middle of February, early February.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's when we will like consistently have a week or two of -20, -15 in Oslo. And then, of course, if you go further north, you are on the regular have a couple of weeks of -30, and most of the winter is -20.
It really is. It is frostpunk.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not proper cold until you can spit and it goes clunk. That's winter. That's cold.
When you're peeing outside and it just freezes solid as it falls.
Yeah, that's risky business. You need to be really fast.
Years ago, when I was a kid, again long before you two were born, there was a TV program
Combined, I think.
in colour. Yeah, it was actually a colour TV program on the BBC about what used to be called the Arctic and Warfare Mountain Cadre of the Royal Marines.
Red, I see your comment.
They're called Royal Marine Mountain Leaders, and they train in Norway every year, and their part of their selection process is in Norway, and their role is to then ensure that Royal Marines have the training they need if they're active in Arctic conditions and the like. And there was I can't remember how many episodes it was now. I think it's actually still. I'll see if it's on iPlayer for those that are able to get iPlayer. And I think it's one of those programs that, although it's kind of many decades old, it's still there. And there was this interesting scene from one of the later episodes. It was kind of after all the selection process in the UK and Scotland, Wales and Scotland. They start down in Cornwall, they move to Wales, then they move to Scotland, then they move to Norway. And after the Norwegian sort of section, which involves things like, let's cut a hole in the ice and let's now jump into the water in there.
That's really fun.
Get yourself out and the like. They when they've all passed, they have this party, and Royal Marines, they have a tendency to drink a lot and party pretty hard. And there's this one bit that they managed to sort of capture. One of the guys, he'd had a fair few pints, needed to empty his bladder, went out, but in his unsteady state, as he was urinating, he glanced a certain part of his body against a metal waste can and instantly stuck.
Yeah.
That's a cold.
And of course, there was kind of hilarity pursued after it. His friends, were maybe not as quick to release him as they perhaps should have done or could have done.
What's more concerning for me is because you would need some sort of
heat source,
probably
wet
heat source or warm liquid to try and free him. So,
yep.
I'm not sure I want to ask that question.
I'll find the link, and you can watch it for yourself. To be honest, I can't remember exactly how they did it, but I suspect I know. Yeah. Given what I know about
there's
Royal
one
Marines.
easy answer.
Yeah, I mean it is going to be one of the other lads, surely, or all of the other lads.
It sounds like an unpleasant experience.
There are so many really, really just awful stories about military personnel and booze. I mean, I remember.
It's almost like they don't do anything else.
just get hammered and get into mischief.
I mean, I wasn't in the military.
Particularly the Royal Marines.
Yeah.
They're infamous the world over for their drinking abilities.
I feel like that's something skills. Not sort of go with the military occupation, but it goes with anyone who is sort of elite military. Maybe it's part of the culture. Maybe it's also a lot of just the stress of the job that you need a coping mechanism. Yeah. And drinking and being social is sort of a bonding experience. It can be.
Yeah, very
therapeutic
very
to some
much.
extent.
There's an element with particularly with the Marines, camaraderie is probably stronger than any other regiment.
There's a high
It
reliance
could be
on each other
argued.
for your own life, isn't there?
Yeah, it could be argued that it's kind of. I think because they operate perhaps in a level. I mean, they're tier 2 special forces essentially. They're not strictly speaking special forces, although some of them are. But they essentially work in the sort of similar way to tier 2 special forces, and it could be argued that they are higher than some of the officially recognised tier 2 special forces, but they operate on a brigade level, which most special forces don't. So most special forces tend to operate in very small groups, which tend to have within their groups very, very high levels of camaraderie, but not always, because they're often pitched together based on sort of skill sets. But I think the Marines, because of the size of the units they operate in,
I guess just more people drinking at the same time.
Yeah, and there's some of the sort of tales you hear are rather disturbing, and some of them are quite sort of infamous. It's certainly. I remember reading. I think I was reading a article about a joint US-UK exercise, large-scale exercise, and Royal Marines were part of the sort of attacking force against. I can't remember which American sort of unit, but the Royal Marines just absolutely slaughtered them. And when it came to the drinking, it was written by one of the Americans. This article, I can't remember if it's an article or a book. It's a few years ago, and it sort of said, this is kind of the only people that can match the Royal Marines for drinking were the Australians. And but
I can believe.
Yeah, and it again, it's kind of a cultural thing. Yeah, Australians tend to kind of sort of work hard, play hard. But there's it's interesting to sort of see Marines in kind of action as well. I used to live down in Plymouth, and occasionally, because there's several, Southwest has got a lot of Royal Marines based. I mean, sometimes you'd kind of go up on Dartmoor and you'd see kind of your bunches of these kind of sort of thick-necked rugby player types just kind of
you mean fridges with legs
over.
and arms.
Yeah. And they're just their ability to just move huge distances with huge weights on their back and just keep going and fight at high level as well, just sort of unparalleled. Yeah, total respect to them as a unit. They are one of the best units in the world.
There was one guy at officer school, the class above me, who I think is officially at least the only person in the Norwegian army who ever got mandated to have double rations of everything, because he was that kind of big burly soldier guy. And like, this is the kind of guy
Gorilla.
Yes, proper like gorilla fridge looking fella. And he would literally need it. He was he went to they need to get sort of a doctor's note to say like, no, his body just to stay alive consumes so much energy that you need to feed him more or he will stop working in the field. And he was the kind of guy who, like, for fun will load up his backpack with some 30-40 kilos, put on his gas mask and go for a run. And
I mean, you said he was kind of a civilized polar bear sort of thing.
Yeah, something like that. And like, it was amazing to see him work because he just went at it. But you also sort of, after getting to know him, you sort of start to realize, like, is there a correlation with it, like high IQ and high sensitivity to pain? Because he doesn't seem to tick either of those boxes. But I mean, he functioned supremely out in the field, but anything that required like more tactical maneuvers than punching straight forward, he was a little bit out of his depth.
Pick up heavy thing, place everything down. Pick up heavy thing, place everything down.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Oh, very useful for carrying sort of squad weapons, though.
Yeah, but sort of going on the whole military vein as well, and food, because always food. So in Norway, you have a lot of these like hell exercises where you go without food and without sleep for a certain period of time out in the field, because you're supposed to practice being miserable. Either that, or just the sergeants like to see people having pain.
Bit of both, probably.
But whenever you do that during winter in Norway, you need to get a minimum amount of calories in, just to stay alive because of the cold.
Yeah.
So even our sort of worst exercise, it gives you this false sense of security because they still feed you, if you are lucky enough to be out in the winter. And if you're lucky, you're in the south of Norway during winter, because then you still can see the sun part of the time. I've had mates stationed up north in Norway, and they would have 2-week-long exercises in the middle of the winter, and it would get down to -40, -50, and they would have to stay out on post, just laying still and watching. And I mean, yeah, that's a miserable existence.
Yeah,
that's a miserable existence. But also, like, one of my mates, he got selected to be like I can't say the target practice group, but he was sort of selected outside of the normal combatants and to be one of the people who was the enemy in all of the exercises. So, like, their normal job, their normal day-to-day activities was to be in the field, which meant that they sort of had office hours in the field. Which meant that
we're going home, lads.
Yeah, it was almost like that, where it's sort of like, oh yeah, no, you need to be on post in case they find you and see you, and you need to fire back at them. When you die, you can go to the shop. So there were moments where, like, as far as I understood, they wouldn't voluntarily toss themselves into the front lines just to be shot so they could go to the cafe or whatever. But it sounds a lot like, okay, the exercise is over, it's 4 o'clock, it's 5 o'clock, whatever. Okay, everyone, let's go down, let's have a kebab. Load up the van. And, like, there's whole towns up north of Norway, like, all of their customers, all of the locals are military. There's like a whole platoon showing up in full regalia. That's normal. But it's having that happen in Oslo, like someone in just full combat gear, without the guns, of course, but full, like, the vests and the backpacks and the camo and all of that, walking into a shop and saying, "One kebab and a Coke, please."
There are places like that in the UK that are complete military towns. Yeah, it's just everything is military. Obviously there's normally bases there, and everyone walking around is either in the military or is married to the military or was military, and there's just nothing in between really, apart from the odd job. The kind of the priest, the teacher, and likely they're probably married into it anyway. Not the priest, because they generally don't get married.
But I mean, in my mind, Britain is so densely populated that you don't have those many sort of vacant pockets of singular communities. But you do? Or is it more like everyone in this village happen to be... Okay.
Yeah, no, there are. There are, certainly if you go up kind of around Salisbury Plain. So the big kind of sort of combat training area, often used with sort of the armoured regiments as well. There's a few towns that are there where there are bases, and the towns are predominantly military. There will be some non-military families, but you're talking pretty much everyone that's there is connected in some way.
And yes, Karo, I always need military. I just thought a comment thing. Sorry.
And there's there are other towns which places like, I mean, Duncan's just sort of mentioned he lives in a military town. If you take some of the port towns, you're going across the south coast. You take Plymouth, Portsmouth, those kind of sort of towns. They are built around the sort of the ports, the military.
We look like Barrow up
Scotland.
North. Yeah. That's basically, it's a nuclear power plant and a shipyard. So it is basically just it's navy and nutters basically.
Yeah, and there's a few other sort of places like that. And if you take places like Catterick, which is one of the biggest places for military training, Aldershot. I mean, Aldershot's quite close to London, but I wouldn't say it is a military town. There's huge numbers of military there. There are people who aren't. So Aldershot is one of the sort of places where there's sufficient proportions of military and non-military that there's often conflict between them, particularly on like Friday nights, on sort of weekends when
fight nights.
People are being given passes to off training, particularly as you've got kind of the parachute regiment, quite a big fixture down there, and parachute regiment are known for perhaps liking to have a bit of a fight now and then. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they are professional nutters.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that sums it up.
I mean, anyone who wants to repeatedly jump out of an airplane seems to be a bit above the normal lines of sanity.
I mean, not just to jump out of an airplane, but to jump out of an airplane into enemy territory.
Yeah, also.
Yeah.
I fall off completely just the thought of jumping out of airplanes for fun. I mean, I think I would do it to survive, but for fun, not so sure. And then adding on enemy lines behind that, maybe you don't actually find your troop again for a little while. Sounds a bit too much.
I have enough trouble with gravity as it is, but to then sort of attack it from very, very high seems quite silly.
For me, a parachute jump is something I always wanted to do in a sort of strange way, but I have quite an intense fear of falling, which kind of often presents as almost like a fear of heights.
Yeah, but
which is quite interesting because I used to do.
Stopping.
Yeah. I mean, I used to do climbing and caving and stuff like that, and particularly caving. I climbed stuff underground that I would never have climbed in daylight on a cliff face, because if you can't see the drop, it's a lot less to worry about, and that would be wearing Wellington boots rather than climbing boots on muddy rock stuff as well.
And that's climbing down, not climbing up though.
Well, both, because if you climb down into a cave, you generally want to climb back out of it, unless you're doing a through trip. And the stuff like that, I didn't mind you doing. The idea of jumping out of a plane, in some way, frightens hell to me. But I know, because of my kind of how I sort of tackled things that involved kind of high levels of adrenaline, kind of extreme sports, there would be a certain amount of me that would go, no, can't do it. Then there'd be a little switch would click, and I'd go, banzai, and just go for it. And there's a bit of me always wanting to kind of have a go at sort of parachuting and paragliding, but it's not something I could feasibly do. It'd be a one-way trip now with my back. I'd be kind of in a wheelchair at the bottom if I did it, if I survived.
I just remembered something. I have jumped in a trapeze once, like the circus thing.
Why?
It's the Scouts. So this was the first jamboree I was in back in 2005, and they built this massive tower in the middle of the camp, where you had zipline going off one side, you had rappelling on one side, and you have climbing on one side, and then the fourth side had just this trapeze bar that you could jump off a platform and catch.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, I thought, oh, that's going to be fun. So I go up there and I stand, and sort of you get the safety breach, and people connect you up, and you get the harness and all of that. And I stand on the edge, and I feel myself freezing, and I feel like I take forever to get there. And then suddenly, I realize that if I don't do anything soon, I will never do it. So I just jump.
Mm-hmm.
And because of being like 12 or something and a bit eager, I overshot it. So I reached for it and I hit it across like my elbows, and then managed to grab it with one hand and start off just hanging there. And goes, okay, well I did that, and then I hear the guy at the bottom saying, "Oh shit, fuck," because in my mind this was in the span of like a minute, at least. In reality, I stood there for 3 seconds and then just jumped. And the guy at the bottom hadn't secured me yet.
Ah,
Because normally people stand there and freeze and take a long time to actually like get the courage up to go do it. And I went through all of that in 3 seconds, which I thought was a couple of minutes or something.
I mean, this explains a lot, and people have commented in the chat, that your kind of excess levels of energy. Perhaps you are actually, like a hummingbird, so everything moves so much. Everything.
faster. Yeah.
Yeah, the scale of time that passes for you is, it's seconds for us, but feels like minutes for you because, your heart rate's 350 beats a minute and everything is constantly a million miles an hour. That would explain quite a lot. It would also explain where Red Bull comes from, because I'm guessing they just hook you up to a machine and pump it straight into the cans.
I can neither confirm nor deny anything.
Is there a fizzing sound when you go for a wee?
Only on Tuesdays. But it's sort of so in the whole military thing, sort of another, like, I had another moment where I felt like everything stopped completely. But that was when we were supposed to experience that CS gas. Did you do that, Andy?
I've never done that. No.
No, which is tear gas, basically.
Yeah.
And they fire that up in a small cabin, at least here in Norway, and like everyone stand with the gas mask, like they see the room go really cloudy, you can't see your hand in front of your face almost. And then sort of one-on-one you're called, you need to take off your mask and you need to say your name and rank and then ask to be dismissed or something like that. And there was one guy who, like, again, one of those like fridge-looking fellas, except he was 160 and weighed more than I did, if pure muscle. He was the kind of guy who decided that, let me see if I can double all of the maximum requirements for the maximum grade for the physical tests. And he did that. Yeah. Absolute nut. Brilliant. Absolutely clever guy. Insane on so many things. And he was like, let me do that and then try to see how many push-ups I can do in there. He got to 3.5 until he just broke. No, he just broke completely, and like all of his snot and tears running and all of that. So he was just before me, and I thought, oh damn, I can't follow him. Like, that's not gonna go well. But so I take off my mask and I just say my thing, and the officer just looks at me and goes, "You don't feel anything?" I was like, "It's tickling a bit." and he asked me like, "Can you sing a song?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know any fucking songs." I completely blanked. And I felt like, again, I stood there for minutes, and it was probably, and then I saw the film afterwards. It was like 3-4 seconds, and then okay, get out of here. And I just walks out, and I was like, well, that's fine. And then I see people running around outside to sort of vent out all of these particulates from the system. And I was like, I left my camera here. I could take some pictures of everyone else coming out. And I was like, all of them was just drenched in snot and sweat. And so apparently the story goes that like 1 in 1,000 is immune to this whole CS gas thing. I'm not sure if that is any immunity or if it's just because I'm a scout and I just spend so much time in sitting in the smoke of a fire that I just burned out all of those.
my wife's like that because she's naturally a redhead, and they genetically different to us in the sense of like the gene mutations sort of include for higher pain tolerance and stuff. So quite often she'll end up with like just random bruises all over her, and has no recollection of how these happened, because there's like a big either lack of pain or a big delay in the pain. So quite often she'll sort of bump into something, realize her leg stopped, and then be confused as to why her leg stopped, and then realize she's like wedged it against something or kicked something, and then it's like, oh, that. Right, okay, now it's tingling. Complete delay.
That sounds like it would be a bit of a problem at some point.
I used to be a little bit like that. I can remember once hurdling a barbed wire fence and kind of caught it, and I was then kind of a little while later going, it's kind of sort of tickles a little bit. and I need to perhaps have a look at this. And I had gaiters on, and so I took my gaiters down, and peeled up kind of sort of out, and discovered that there was this kind of flap of skin that was kind of 10 centimeters by 5 centimeters that was kind of not attached on 3 sides on my leg. It was like,
I would normally call that a problem.
I mean, at
least
least it was still
pushed it back, and I just put it back in place, put a great big dressing over it, and carried on. It's like, well, don't slow me down. But
so, do you have? Is it called orienteering in English?
Yep.
The sport of running in the forest and looking at things that people lost or people placed out to compare.
Clever running. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that kind of thing. So I grew up in a family that did a lot of that. It was before I joined the Scouts. And there's this certain group of people, at least in Norway, and that's the orienteering people, that would sort of go up to the medic and there's be blood running down their legs and say, do you think I need a plaster for this, a band-aid or something? There was like, you need stitches, you should lay down, how are you walking? And I've seen people literally who have gone a bit wild and suddenly found themselves in a tangle of barbed wire, and it's like, this is inconvenient, and then sort of wrestle them free, and sort of this, you see the tatters of their suit or the running costume and all of that. It's like, those people are extra crazy, like Norwegians, and then out there a bit. Do you have the same sort of cultural thing?
Yeah, there's I don't know if it's still going. I suspect it. Well, Chloe's probably put a stave to it. There used to be, have you heard of like the obstacle racing type stuff, like Spartan races and Tough Mudder and things like that?
I've seen those.
Before even they started, there used to be a race in, I think it was somewhere in the Midlands, Staffordshire, I think. There was a guy there who possibly was ex-Special Forces, possibly not. He set up a race called, and basically, and there's a few variations on it, and it was known. What was the name of it? It was kind of like, it's known as kind of one of the toughest kind of races that you could possibly do, and there were a few variations. So there were things like, there's the marathon, and basically it's an obstacle course. 26 miles you have to do around this obstacle course. And there's things like, he literally would, on this land, and it's like a farm, he would literally spend a year between races, because he'd only done once a year, ensuring that as many brambles and nettles would grow in a particular area that he would then pass things through. There would be, literally you'd have to wade through, like it would run in winter, so it'd be like ice cold water to go through, and just all sorts of horrible possible things. And basically you have to sign a waiver before you could take part. You'd get a lot of military
funny
guys
thing, the
taking
concept
part.
of waivers doesn't really exist in Norway, but I can get to that later. Please
I think
continue.
this was kind of more basically because it was literally to the point of you could die. There was one of the races was literally there was certain kind of, again, one of these level of races, it was last man standing. So basically it's go around this obstacle race and it's the last man standing. And there are some, I'll see if I can find some video clips. There's a video clip I remember seeing of the guy who won this particular year. He's basically in the last stages of hypothermia before complete collapse. He is barely moving. He's completely incoherent. He cannot understand instructions. He can barely stand. A lesson in kind of outdoor first aid. It's quite an interesting kind of thing to sort of watch and see. And he's just literally, they kept going. I can't remember how many hours it was that they were going in winter, and essentially they're just in running kit, going around these kind of completely crazy obstacles, going through freezing cold water, just non-stop. There's no kind of take a break and have a quick coffee halfway through. It's literally you start and you finish. Whoever's still standing, however many laps it takes, if it's 5 laps, if it's 500 laps, last man standing wins. And it's just kind of
this is just confirming my argument for the Outernet being terrible. It's a horrible place.
Their solution is better though out there.
Yeah, the resolution's great, but the gameplay's awful.
Yeah. Level design is bad, and
And the NPCs are just a pain. Yeah.
But
Mention the grind for resources.
a couple of fun stories, sort of in that obstacle course vein. A while back, I found in our national broadcast website, I found an archived footage from late 40s, early 50s of an obstacle course that the scouts have put up in the forest north of Oslo. Like, and also fun thing, 2/3 of Oslo municipality, our capital, is forest.
Oh.
Yeah, biggest capital in
That's
the world. But that's because like a lot of it is forest.
Where you draw the boundary.
Yeah. But so they had this obstacle course, and because this was just after the army, like they wanted like kids to be a bit tough to be able to do well in next time people went to shit or things went to shit. So they had a lot of those jumping, rounding, climbing kind of things in an obstacle course. It was kids in like 10, 12-year-olds, maybe as old as 14. Not entirely sure what the demographic was specifically, but you also would have this ravine that they would have to swing a rope across. And to make things exciting, one of the leaders would stand just around the corner of the ravine with a bundle of dynamites and cut into manageable length, light them, and toss into the river underneath the kid, so that he would have this fountain of water coming up at him as he was swinging across. I've not heard about this being done after they recorded this for NRK, the National Broadcasting, and there might be a good reason for that. But
quite possibly.
Sort of in the whole vein of Iron Man things and those crazy things there, the elementary school, the primary school I went to, in 6th and 7th grade, we would have a miniature Iron Man race where you would bicycle uphill for, I don't even recall how many kilometers. It could be something like 5 kilometers, like 6th, 7th grade. Then you would run X number of kilometers, a kilometer or two, and then you would go into a mud crawl through like a proper mud pit. And of course, Norway being Norway, this was usually cold, and at times it would be just pure liquid in a marsh, so you would just sink up to your nose. At least the shorter kids would. And there was the whole thing of going over the tall branches and under the low ones, and then a dead sprint into finishing line. So I grew up with that, which is not a really common thing in Norway. That was, I think, particularly the primary school I went to. But yeah, I mean, that's fun.
Reminded me of I just have to check the wording of it then, but one of those funny, terrible Jamie style dad gags, talking about hippos being able to run faster than humans on land and swim faster than humans in the water, so that the cycle race is the only time you're going to beat them in a triathlon.
But hippos don't. Grown-up hippos don't swim. They can't float. They're too fat.
No, they run on the bottom, don't they?
Yeah. Probably still faster than most humans would swim, but
they are sizable lumps.
Yeah. Big mouths. Most dangerous
What
animal in
terrible
Africa.
cyclists.
Yeah, most dangerous
think
animal in Africa, I think.
Think so.
Makes sense. I mentioned before my South African mate. He said about the leopards being particularly bad. Compared, everyone thinks it's going to be the lions or hyenas or anything like that. But he said that a lot of the other big cats will quite happily kill an animal, feast on it, and then walk away from it because they only want the fresh meat.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the leopards will quite happily eat older meat that's sort of on the verge of rotting. So what they quite often do is when there's a fresh kill, leopards will quite often grab the meat and drag it up a tree.
Yeah.
Because they'll quite happily leave it up in the tree and feast on it as and when they want to. but none of the other cats will either climb the tree or will eat the rotten food.
Yeah.
So they're a lot more dangerous in that respect. He's saying he was a truck driver out there, so he'd be driving all over southern Africa, and he woke up one morning in his truck, and there's a leopard on the passenger seat next to him because he'd had the window open, and it just, while he's been asleep in his cab, it just climbed in and basically sat next to him. So he's like, had this like lifetime of like knowing that leopards are really, really bad, and the more dangerous of the big cats in the area, and then just suddenly waking up to see one sat next to him. He's like, shit.
At least he woke up.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he basically just sort of shouted at it, and it climbed out the window and buggered off. But yeah, so it was like one of the more harrowing experiences of his time out there.
It's just it's interesting how the cats can vary in what they can do and how they do it. Like cheetahs cannot jump. So a lot of zoos, you see a cheetah enclosure, it'll have quite low fencing. 2-meter fencing.
Ooh, and the puma doesn't exist. I can see you thinking now.
Isn't it? It's a name for another
panther.
Yeah, and like a black panther is essentially a leopard.
You could call that a puma, or a lot of people would call that a puma, but puma doesn't exist.
Now, a panther can jump in excess of at least 16 feet in the air. So what's that, 5 meters?
I'd heard it could jump higher than a house, but that's mostly because houses can't jump.
It don't jump. Yeah.
Dad mode is back on.
Yep. That joke's the only jokes to tell.
We were in India in 2011. My dad and my brothers and me, and we went to a zoo and saw a Bengal tiger, and it was swimming all over the place. But at some point, for some reason, it sort of turns around and sort of puts its butt close to the screen where we were at, and then just ejaculates on the screen in front of us. Just sort of goes around, turns around, and goes poof, and then walks off. And me and my dad, all of us like boys, we were just sitting there going, "Well, that's fucking hilarious, but why?"
Clearly, it just likes Norwegian lads.
Could be.
It reminds me actually the comedian Sanjeev Bhaskar. He was on an interview, I forget who with, but it actually reminded me of the story earlier with the kind of think what it was that we got onto, but when Andy was talking about the complete left field idea, and he was saying that he hates driving in India just because of the absolute chaos on the roads. But he was saying that he knew there were like 2 stories about driving in India that stuck in my head. And said that he knew when he'd driven across into India, he'd gone with a friend. He knew when he'd crossed the border because there was a bus coming towards them, and there were 2 kids on the bonnet. Oh, the bonnet had been removed, but they were basically like sat up, up where the bonnet would be. One with a big jug and the other one with another jug. And what they were doing is one was up top pouring water into the top of the radiator, and the other one was down at the bottom hanging off underneath the radiator, catching all the water that would come out of the radiator and into the other jug, and then passing it back up. They just kept swapping jugs, just pouring the water through, just to keep the bus running. He said the other one was him and his mate it was late at night, and there was they just saw one headlight coming towards them. So it's like, it must be a motorbike or something. And then his friend went, it could also be a car with one headlight missing. Or it could be 2 mopeds carrying a wardrobe with one missing headlight. And this was like, completely dead serious. It's like, no, it could well be these things, not just like, taking the piss or in fact, it's like these are things you would see on the road. So, don't just assume that it's one motorbike because you see one headlight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It could well be anything you like.
there's a lot of crazy things going on in India when it comes to driving and all of that. But it's I heard one horrific tale that there was this a bus that crashed and some 50 odd people died or something, but everyone inside the bus survived.
Just everyone hanging on the outside.
Sitting on top and hanging on the outside, and yeah,
We see. I've seen a few videos over the years, kind of like trains going through stations at high speed, or kind of, and literally people are on the tracks waiting for the train, and they kind of realise, oh, it's a high speed train rather than the local one's going to stop, and then they're trying to get off quickly. I mean, there's a few kind of. It's just crazy, some of the things that you see kind of happening.
Have you seen the ones where they go really, really, really slowly through like the markets? And the
Yeah.
market is basically built on the train track.
yeah,
So
that's
as
they
the
kind
train
of
comes through, they
collapse.
start lifting
Yeah.
lifting all the merchandise out the way and pulling the cover down and stuff, and then Madness.
It is crazy, isn't it? But people adapt to the situations they have and the worlds they live in, and
Absolutely.
but it's sort of it's funny that there's in other parts of the world or outside of Europe, basically, all of the trains that are put down were put down by the British.
apart from America, yeah.
I think America
Yeah.
was put down by the navvies, wasn't it? So that would be
Yeah,
the Irish Labour.
yeah, slave labor.
I
I
think
think
it's good.
I think West Coast was more Chinese labor in America.
Yes,
Might be wrong.
Yes.
yeah, because they had that connection in the middle, didn't they? Where
Yeah.
the East Coast train lines were coming across.
But it's sort of the fun thing of you only see like trains in other parts of the world where the British have been, and there used to be a lot of, or the first train that was ever put down in China, sort of to display the magnificence of capitalism and the British Empire and all of that. As soon as the British left, the Chinese just removed it and thought, bugger all that. That seems like a noise problem.
This is completely fair.
It sort of explains why there's one Trans-Siberian railway that's sort of more or less has been functioning all the time. That's one track, and then there's nothing else connecting Europe to the rest of the world with train.
Which makes sense. I suppose you'd need like constant maintenance and stuff anyway. It might not be particularly worthwhile.
I mean,
once we drained that side of the world from things that we wanted to keep,
or you get kicked out.
Yeah, well, yeah. I did see someone was suggesting the other day that it's actually been doing the rounds for a while online, but if they ever do a reboot or a remake or a follow-on from the Indiana Jones films, they should make it with use the main character being his daughter or granddaughter, who's then trying to smuggle all the artifacts back to the places that he's taking them from.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a fantastic idea.
That would be fun. That'd be a really good one. I actually saw Lindy Beige on YouTube. He recently has been thank you. He's been publishing a lot of videos he filmed just before the pandemic, I think, and one of them it's from Tikal, the Mayan capital, which really fun thing is that was a Stone Age civilization with dynasties, but without metal technologies. But there's
more recent than you realise.
They collapsed in 900 after or something, 900s or something. I think
Something like that.
Yeah, but like at this one moment, he picks up like this carved rock or something, and goes, "This belongs in a museum," and he pretends to put it in his bag, and then the tour guide just looks at him, and he goes, "Oh, look over there!" And the camera pans, and the tour guide pans, and he just. Whoop. Lindy Beige is a weird one. he's like the quintessential British, I feel, in so many ways. Like, goes
I
around
don't
the
know
world.
if to take that as an insult or not.
He just talks about history and how weird and great things are in history and other places in the world. And he wears only beige. That's why he's called Lindy Beige, because he's a Lindy dancer and wears only beige. So it's like, apparently that's a thing.
It must be.
No, we're an hour and a half in, and I know we're not going to have a long one tonight because obviously, Rasmus is living in the future already, and
Yep.
it's already kind of tomorrow on his book. But I mean, we've talked a lot about history this evening, but of course, you're kind of most well known in the maker community for kind of your essentially what could be regarded as a historical making art. Sort of blacksmithing. So I mean,
He's a dancer.
you've obviously you've got this fascination for kind of history.
Yeah.
Did that lead into the blacksmithing, or did the blacksmithing lead into the history, or is it kind of just something that kind of came together?
Or have you just always been weird?
Yeah.
That one.
How did you?
Weird, always.
How did you become a blacksmith? What's the connection with history?
Well, Andy, is this getting into an origin story here? Are we actually introducing Rasmus?
Maybe. No.
I suppose I was going to say, for those who don't know, it is Rasmus, not the Rasmus. He's no longer in the shadows.
Fuck you. And funnily enough, when I was in Japan, like on some Japanese music magazine, the front cover was the Rasmus the week I arrived. I've never heard of the band in my life, and then I show up and I was like, this guy. I was like,
Just holding them up going, me.
Yeah, it was a really surreal thing, but I had never heard of the band before showing up there, and as people like showed it to me, I was like, well, fuck them stealing my name. Our family has used the Rasmus name for hundreds of years.
To be fair, it's a bit like that in ours with Mark Readers. Quite a few of them.
I mean, my great-grandfather was called Rasmus, and like the thing behind me there, which you can't see, but it's a big cupboard. It's made by him, or made for him as a gift at some point, maybe a wedding gift. I'm not sure. Big cupboard-like looking thing. I'll see if I can get you a picture later on. And his grandfather was also called Rasmus, and a couple further back there as well. Norway has this really sort of completely sidestep for origin stories. Norway has this really specific naming tradition that I don't think anyone consciously know about, although everyone still keeps it. And that's the fact that the first son is supposed to always be named after the father's father, and the second son after the mother's father, and the same goes on the female line. So you're always recycling names, but it's only when you come to the fifth and sixth child you sort of can choose freely, sort of historically, traditionally.
You just write the first few off and then pick a good one down the line.
Yeah, and of course the problem would occur when the first child was called Ole after his grandfather Ole, he would die as a kid, so you have a new kid and you name that kid Ole. And then you have the weird occasions where, the first kid is deadly sick, probably not going to make it. Let's name the new one Ole, just to be sure. And then the old one survives, and you have Ole the old and Ole the younger, or the big and small Ole, or something like that. It was a really common problem, actually.
I can imagine.
And when you go through the 1700s, 90% of all of the women were called Anne, or variations of that.
I suppose it's become less and less of a problem these days. Medical advances and stuff.
Yeah, and people have fewer kids, so it's more we just use two names and that's it. But also, as I said, it's not like it's a tradition people keep anymore. It's just I've noticed that it goes on, and you probably have known as well that there's certain names that comes and goes in waves.
Yeah.
and with sort of generations. So a lot of the names that were common for my grandfathers are starting to come up again as my generation has kids.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think there's a few that will never come back.
Like Adolf.
Well, yeah, that for one, definitely. But yeah, there's a handful. But weirdly, obviously there's newer and newer ones. But like Wendy wasn't seen before Peter Pan.
Oh, yeah.
That was a big insurgence of that a girls called Wendy after Peter Pan, but like no record of Wendy before then.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm.
Well, it's like in the UK. There were no kids called Kylie before Neighbours came on TV.
Of course, yeah.
And yeah, there's things like that. Yeah, you get kind of fashion for names based on kind of what celebrities are doing. That's quite a common thing. And then you'll get things like what's the oh look, there's a royal baby. What have they been called? Because they'll tend to follow more traditional naming routes. Yeah. And so then there'll be a kind of a bunch of children born at the same time who will also get named sort of similar sort of things. But yeah, I mean, some names do kind of die out. Yeah, it's like I think I only ever taught in 20 years one Derek. And I've never taught a Nigel.
Sounds like a dick.
But there are names that kind of will gain kind of popularity, and there'll be some that will just they will disappear. Particularly some of the sort of the older styles of names. Yeah,
I mean, there was a lot of people who named their kid Khaleesi after Game of Thrones were running on TV.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah.
And then there's like Kanye West kid who called their child North, so it's named after an airline in the US or something.
Yeah.
We've always had the kind of the odd ones. You get I'm pretty sure it was Billy Connolly and his wife named their kids something fairly strange, and there were a few other kind of comedians about the same sort of time that had kind of sort of strange names for their kids.
Apple and Honey and things like that.
Yeah.
That for kids' names were a bit more.
Do worry though. I did once teach a Chardonnay, and you kind of think, did you name your kid after your favourite wine?
Or is that how the kid was conceived?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe. It's people choose all sorts of reasons. Variations on where they were when the kid was conceived.
Well, I suppose that's the old joke, isn't it? Is with the two kids, Florence saying, "Oh, why am I called Florence?" Because that was we went on holiday. That's where you were conceived. No, not you. Back of a full Cortina.
Yeah.
I butchered that joke, but you got the gist.
I've heard it before.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's my dad is sometimes the daddest of all dads, to the extent that it only feels like he has the same like 50 jokes, and as kids, after he told a joke about like people in prison who sort of they had all of the same jokes, so to be efficient about it, they gave all the jokes numbers, and people just shout out numbers, people would laugh. And then a new guy comes in and he sees his system and he goes, "Oh, I see what they're doing." So he calls out like 767. And I was like, everyone dies laughing because they'd never heard that one before. But Dad told that joke, and then me and my brothers, we just started to sort of numbering his jokes. And so whenever we would bring new friends over or dates or all of that, and he would start telling stories, we would have a game of trying to guess the ending of the story and the joke before he gets to it. He told furious stories of that for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah. If you'd numbered the fragments of the stories, you could then just
Mix and
rattle
match.
off. Yeah, you could just rattle off along, either a formula or something like that, and like a choose your own adventure using mathematical equations to throw at your dad.
But okay, my dad almost did that once. He told the story of a girl was asking for his number, like way back when, and this was a girl he wasn't really interested in, so he gave his phone number like as an equation. He never heard from that girl again for some reason. But that's also, but my dad's also that kind of guy who like would perfectly be able to just on the spot make up an equation that would give him out his phone number. No relation to how weird I am, just to put that out there.
Really?
Oh no, I think I know that we constantly take the piss out of you, as you well know, and I know your recent episode of, not today's one, but your last week's episode of Two Thirds Focused at least got me back a little bit. I suppose for those who don't know, that there is a hell of a lot of love between us, and obviously for Steve as well. But it's we pass the insults around between the three of us.
Yeah. And then there's people like Johnny from Bespoke Cloak Design and all that.
He deserves everything he gets.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, like his grandfather's lost all of those potatoes. Those bastards.
We should say for the people not in on the joke that, again, there is a lot of love between us and Johnny as well. Again, we just trade insults. It's a sign of affection to for him to call Rasmus a Russian and to call me a wizard and me to call him Legolas.
Check out the Make Us Waffle Instagram post for Rasmus coming on, and you'll see examples of it.
Yeah, and that was the usual amount of shenanigans, sadly, or something. But should we get back to the thing you were asking, Andy, before I rattled off names?
Yeah. Blacksmithing first, then history, or history, then blacksmithing, or do they come together?
I think I just like fire.
Yeah, keeps you warm in the cold winters, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean,
what you said is you read the history books before you burnt them.
Oh, of course, come on, you can't waste knowledge.
I'm still upset about the Library of Alexandria.
That wasn't us.
No, I know.
We burned all the monasteries and cloisters, but that's different. No, I think the whole blacksmithing thing, sort of, I just fell into it. We had metal shop at school for a little bit, and I joined the Scouts when I was 12 or something. So I think it's just the combination of all those things that sort of happened.
Fire and metal, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I when I started going into blacksmithing, that was all after officer school and the army and working as a journalist and as a working at a cinema and a lot of different things. And then, like, a scout mate of mine said, this was in Stavanger when we had the truckloads of snow delivered in the middle of summer to have snowball fights, as you do in Norway. And he was sort of like talking about what he was going to do after summer, and it was like going up to Dovre, this like the quintessential mountain town of Norway, going to school studying traditional wood carving and like hiking in nature and all of the good fancy things. And I was like, that sounds like fun, but I'm not sure it's wood carving and kindling making is for me. And then he was like, oh no, don't worry, they have blacksmithing as well. I was like, what? They do what now? And 3 days after that, I had applied, gotten accepted, and found a place to live near the school. And then I just never stopped. We was early on allowed into the metal shop after hours, and because I had done all of the normal school stuff, I only had blacksmithing and PE basically at school. So I like almost immediately ended up spending 60 hours a week in the forge.
Nice.
And I guess, haven't really done
Stopped.
anything else. Yeah.
If you love it,
I mean-
why not?
Yeah, I mean, I've done other things as well. I've worked as a barkeep after that. Not a doorman. Shut up, Steve. And a waiter. And
Worked in IT.
when I lived in Japan, I built a couple of web pages, actually, for some people. They were horrible.
IT. Web pages
Yeah.
are IT.
Yeah. I mean, and I've done a tiny bit of radio. I worked in esports for a little bit. And this like the esport thing, that's just a few years ago. The last proper gig I had was 7 weeks on telly, national TV, casting League of Legends. I just showed up and wanted to like help mop the floor and hang out with cool people, and suddenly I started chatting to them, and they thought, "Oh, what do you think?" I was like, "Well, like you could have done this, you could have done this there, and maybe this can be better." And I was like, "Cool, you want to help out?" I was like, I am helping out, but can you like write the script for next episode, just sort of summarizing the previous week's matches and all that?" And I sent that in. I was like, "Good, can you just change these two things? And we need another caster for this week." This was Tuesday, and it was going live on Friday. So I was like, "I've never done that before, but I could try if you dare to bet on me." And I got stuck there for 7 weeks finishing the series because apparently I was better than all the other people they had found.
Cool.
Probably doesn't say much about the other people, but
Or it's an expression of how talented you are.
I mean, I have that weird mind where I remember a lot of things. So, like, rattling off like the lore of characters and all of the specific abilities and how they can combine them and interact with them, I could do all of that, and then someone else could just be the shouty man who did the play-by-play. And then after the fact, I can explain, okay, so here's what actually happened in this fight. So I saw this happening, this going there, they moved so, and sort of doing all the diagrams sort of verbally on screen. But yeah, I don't talk much about that because, I mean, it was sort of this flash in a pan of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a
In
great
a
story
previous
to
life.
have. Yeah.
Yeah.
These little things that happen in our lives often make the best stories.
Yeah. I have another weird one that I'm not sure if I've... Oh, I mentioned it to you, I think, just before Malty's wedding. So I learned to scuba dive from one of the world's best hypnotists.
Which, I mean, that as a phrase in itself is beautiful.
I also like the fact that I went to Japan as an exchange student and learned German. That's also a good one, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's a testament to how you don't tend to do things in the usual kind of way.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's my blend of autism shining out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when I was in the army, I dropped technically out of officer school because the thought of being in charge of driving a lorry full of explosives sort of gave me the heebie-jeebies. And gave me
Perfectly rational.
the closest I've ever been to having proper breakdowns and anxiety attacks. That was the thought of doing that, and then approaching it and actually being told that you're supposed to be starting doing that next week, and I was like, I'm dying already. But I took pity on me, and I found a position where I was in charge of the garrison's newspaper. At the time, of course, the garrison didn't have a newspaper, so I had to make it. Also, a fun happenstance of things. Which went fairly well, but sort of in that position, I also ended up talking to a lot of the talents that were coming in to entertain the new recruits and the troops and all that. One of them was the sergeant, or one of the old best mates of the guy in charge of the welfare program. So, because I worked very closely with the welfare people, I was invited to the party afterwards. He was civilian, so it was sort of allowed to go off privately to party with your superiors. Probably not really, because people knew about it, but it was borderlines, and we treated it fairly. It went well. And then, of course, this hypnotist also show up, and he was like, he enjoyed properly to be like the center of attention at the party and doing all the crazy things and all that. Like you would imagine someone who goes from being a proper Marine to being a hypnotist. Like there's some weird things in that personality that you sort of bring along. And at this party, he sort of goes on and says like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing all this scuba diving down in Alicante in Spain, and he has a house, and all of us should come down and learn to scuba dive and like all of that." And he was basically just doing a sales pitch. I was the only one who was stupid enough to think of it as an honest invitation. So the summer after I finished so this was the same, sort of after the army, before the scout jamboree, and then I went down to learn scuba diving from him, and I stayed with him for a week, and he basically gave me the intensive course, and I did all of it, from underwater photography to wreckage to nitrox and dry suits and wetsuits and all of that in a week. And then he just sent me back home, and he offered me a job and everything. It was like, I just have this blacksmithing thing. I need to try that first. He was a bit disappointed at that. But it was one of the really weird thing. And then like being around him and his eccentric personality type. If you think me is weird, he was different, kind of weird. Meeting his friends down there and all of that. It was one of those insane experiences. We stayed in touch a little bit after that, but like he travels the world doing shows and teaching scuba diving, or he used to do a lot of scuba diving down inside of Spain and all that. So
it's I'm just checking that it's just giving me flashbacks to the True Spies podcast, talking about the Mossad episode with setting up a scuba diving training center as a front for a military outpost.
Really?
Yeah, it's a really good episode. But it was just giving me those kind of
thoughts. Is it a very recent episode? Because I just before coming on here, I heard the episode on sort of how they set up the cybersecurity in national defense in the US in late 90s or something.
Yeah, I think this is the second episode, I think.
Yeah, it's quite an early one, I think.
Oh, okay. So I haven't got that far back yet.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, because me and Andy has this constant duel now. It seems of who can listen to the most amount of podcasts.
So you tend to just listen to them and work lots and lots and lots, whereas Andy just bends time, space, and reality to take more into his head.
It seems like it. Yeah.
What can I say? Yeah.
Okay, so Andy, what you at for December so far?
Let me have a little look. I'll have to.
I'll check mine as well.
Just diving. Gotta remember.
So for the
find it.
For the audio listeners, they are checking their stats
Literally
on the podcast
checking
apps
our
to see.
phones now. Yeah.
So for December so far, I'm at 3 days and 5 hours.
This is impressive because we're 12 days in.
I work a lot.
Oh, you're 3 days. I think you've popped ahead of me then, because a few days ago I was slightly ahead of you. Because with December I'm now 2 days and 23 hours.
Okay,
So
I'm leading with 6 hours.
fallen a bit behind.
That's fine. You can keep going on behind. That's
family weekend. Yes, but how much are you up for the year? What's your? Oh, my year's spoilt though, isn't it? Because I changed phones partway through the year.
Yeah, you said so.
And so
I'm at 78 days and 22 hours for 2021.
Yeah, I'm at 52 days. But that's because it stopped at June. So basically about 52 days after kind of, only 9...
I think you'll win next year.
7 months.
Even if I run off with December, I think you'll win next year.
What's quite interesting though is that for 2020 I've got 0 on this listing. But for 2019 I've got 15 hours. I don't know how on earth that's happened. Because I didn't have this phone. I just bought this phone this year. I don't know. Yeah.
Bending time, space, and reality.
Yeah. So that's kind of sort of things that have been grabbing our attention, which is kind of I think that's called a segue in full
nice
terms.
Segue.
Yeah.
Is that just a leg of animal there?
Lamb, yes.
As you do.
Did you have any questions about that, or?
For anyone else, yes. For you, mate, no.
So for those who are perhaps listening for the first time, this is probably a bit of a
Why
shock
only
of an
now?
episode. Yeah, why only now? But go back and catch up. We tend to think of, rather than kind of what's our focus or what's our thing we're going to spiff, or what's we tend to talk about kind of what's grabbing our attention.
Now
And
we
don't
need to
limit
play
things to.
You said the S word.
Oh, we know there's lots and lots
Yeah.
of tax we need to pay those bills.
So sort of
They get free advertising every week.
Yeah, the question is, what, Rasmus, what's been grabbing your attention lately? Yeah, things that you may have read, seen, watched, been doing, going to do, that you've been thinking about. What's the kind of
So many things. Come on.
well,
Recording
give us a
your own
few.
podcast doesn't count.
Fuck. I don't know. Can I think on it? No. I just watched the second to last episode of the Foundation series. Isaac Asimov.
I am looking forward to marathoning the whole thing. I haven't watched any of it yet. I've read most of the books. I'm looking forward to marathoning that over Christmas.
That's so new one to me. What's the premise on that?
Isaac Asimov's Foundation series turned into a TV series on Apple
Are
TV.
you familiar with the Foundation books, Andy?
Maybe a long time ago.
Or
I mean,
they are
they're all
'cause
science fiction, but yeah.
Because I read a lot of Asimov when I was a teenager,
Foundation was like his quintessential.
so I may have done, but it's not something that kind of jumps into my head.
The short premise of it is that it's 12,000 years into the rule of the Empire, galactic spanning empire. You have currently the dynasty of Cleon, genetically identical rulers, being raised as we always have sort of one kid, one adult, and one old man, so to speak. Dawn, dusk, and dawn, day, and dusk. And in this world, you have Harry Seldon, who shows up with psychohistory,
Which is his mathematical model for how to predict the rise and fall of civilizations and things like that, but on a massive, galactic empire type scale. To be able
it's using math to predict a very, very large group of people's movements and behaviors.
Yeah.
So sort of collectively, it's sort of predicting how a swarm of birds will fly instead of one individual bird in that swarm, being a lot easier. And in his predictions, he's predicting the fall of the empire, the Dark Ages, and sort of the galaxy-spanning civil war after that, and then sort of the new golden age coming after it. And he wants them to build a foundation to preserve as much knowledge as possible and keep it safe through these Dark Ages up until it's useful again and civilization can sort of quicker come out of the Dark Ages into new civilized golden age. That's the starting premise. But then you have, of course, the current empire emperor ruler who sees this as an immediate threat, and like he's predicting my downfall. And all of those politics that goes on in this empire, and they do a really, really well job to sort of keep it contained and sort of give you bite-sized chunks of information at a time and sort of slowly expanding the universe. But still, it's considered to be a TV series, and that was never able to fully be realized because the world that Asimov created is so vast and complex. Yeah, so far, they've done a really good job. There's a lot of tiny things that I'm really looking forward to reading the book and check, because I probably read the books 10, 15 years ago. So before I was born, basically. And
you beat me to it.
I saw you were coming up with it. So there's some things I want to check on, but if you don't remember or haven't read the books, this is a really good series. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of really interesting intrigues going on. They don't do any heavy-handed explanation. They don't beat you over the head with much. there's some things that feels weird. Like we only really heard talk about 5 planets so far through the first season in this gigantic galactic empire, which is weird. But then you also have like things of they're talking of there's trillions upon trillions of people living. There's one accident where 100 million people die, and it's just brushed off because it's a big thing. It's a symbol of a big thing, but in the vastness of it, it's sort of like 100 million is nothing. It's a fraction, tiniest fraction.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how human brains are vastly ill-equipped to deal with very large or very small. You know, it's a perfect narrative works that explains, well, not explains, but demonstrates why people are not very good at dealing with quantum mechanics or, gravitational theory or anything like
Climate
that.
change.
It's dealing with very massive numbers and very massive things.
Yeah.
A big planet is big number. One planet easy to understand, but the size of the planet then gets into numbers bigger than 5, and humans just we can count to 5 and then it's many. It's about as good as we can do. But yeah, it's what I'm looking forward to watching. It's been probably 5 years or so since I did the books. I think I've done 4 or 5 of the Foundation series. It's
going to be 30
massive.
years since I've read any Asimov.
Yeah. It's a if you like science fiction and like a bit hardcore science fiction, this is really good.
I'll go for that.
Because like Asimov, I think is the person who sort of defined the modern science fiction genre by this collection of volumes.
Massive influence.
Yeah, I mean, Asimov is certainly kind of one of the big names in the definition of science fiction. I mean, you've also got people obviously like Arthur C. Clarke. I guess there's an overlap between Clarke and Asimov.
Yeah, and same between like Asimov and Philip K. Dick.
And Greg Bear.
If you see them in series, you sort of almost see like they only add on certain elements from the previous inspirations. Asimov just put it far out into space and made it big.
And push robotics as well, of course. Yeah.
I don't think I know that.
Things like iRobot.
Right. Yes.
The 3 laws of robotics. They're
of course,
Asimov's.
yeah. I never read those. I just watched Will Smith iRobot movie.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually because the pantheon, in the same way that Foundation is made up of many volumes.
4, I think.
No, it's more than that because there's lots of others in the Foundation universe.
I missed out then.
I think I've done 4 or 5, and I know there's like I think 3 prequels to it and all sorts of stuff. But the iRobot sort of collection again is multiple books, and very little of it is actually what the film was based on. There you go. Red's jumped in 6 in the prelude, but it's like a lot of those kind of media adaptations and stuff. I mean, I mentioned Philip K. Dick before. Things like Total Recall is based on We Can Remember It For You Wholesale.
Yes.
And like the reason why the 2 films are very different from each other is because the original, the Arnold Schwarzenegger film, used like the first 10-15 minutes of the film is what the book's based on, and then everything else in the rest of the film is completely different. And the same with like Minority Report, which again is another PKD story.
Blade Runner was
Blade Runner as well.
Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Yeah.
Yes, that's the name.
And there's so many of these that are like Philip K. Dick stories that have then been adapted into stuff that the only way people know about them. They're so far removed from the books. But again, another reason to go and read the Foundation books as well after watching the series.
I think they're betting on. I'm not sure if I heard that there are a greenlit season 2 yet, but I mean, I'm starting to grow really fond of this concept of taking a whole book series and turning it into a show, because it won't be this ever running thing of milking it. Will be. Of course, they will sort of only do it as long as it makes them money, but it's a limited run thing. I mean, Game of Thrones sort of went a bit iffy after they ran out of books, but they still sort of completed, and it still was spectacular at the end. And then you have the Wheel of Time as well coming up now and going.
Yeah, that's a new one.
Yeah,
had you talking about that? It's just one that I want to check out as well. 'Cause I'm not familiar with the books or the TV
I'm
series.
not. I had some colleagues probably about sort of 10 years or so ago. Literally, there were 4 of us in the department, and 3 of them were really into kind of the Wheel of Time series. Yeah,
I've read all of
the
the books multiple times.
Yeah, and it's like I've never read them, and it's. I mean, the problem for me is there's just so many books out there. I mean, this thing. I mean, there's literally millions of books apparently, and I can't read them all.
Just by trying.
Yeah, to be honest, reading isn't. I've struggled with reading the past few years, to be honest. But
I even dug out the old Dune books that my dad gave me a couple of decades ago, and said, like, here's his old collection of science fiction and fantasy books, like Gunk paperbacks, and they've all been living in boxes.
It'll enrich you.
Yeah, I read almost all written by David Eddings, if that rings any bells.
The name rings a bell. I don't think I've read any of his. But it's definitely a name I've come across.
Yeah, it had a couple of really interesting stories. Actually, I referenced that in an episode of our podcast a while back, of this sort of maker mentality, because they have this sidekick character in the series that's called. It's a series of Sapphire Throne, I think it's called. I don't recall the name of the series, but that's one of the books there. And you have basically the sidekick character, which is the squire to one of the badass warriors, the lord or something. But he's also the character who knows how to fix everything. He's just not a good fighter. He just can do everything else apart from magic and fighting, so to speak. And there's moments of, like, they're sailing the whole armada across a strait or something, and in mid-conversation he just runs off because he noticed that the lads at the opposite end have not changed tack or sails, so the whole flotilla that is bound together will not turn properly. And he noticed that because the wind changed, and he didn't hear that click of the boom arm going at the other end. And that kind of experience, I remember those books probably way more fondly than they're well written at the moment. But there's a lot of good books out there, and the Wheel of Time it's long and it's big, and you could there's probably some books in the middle there you could skip completely. But I really like the universe. I like how they put it together, or Robert Jordan put it together. And I like sort of, it's so epic you can almost live in it for a while, almost a couple of years while you read the books. And then you have the Amazon TV series now, where they are like knocking out all the bells and whistles to make this as grand as they possibly could. And there's things in there that I don't really like, but it's small things like the Ogier they meet, like just the character design of him. There's some things that I would love to have different. I would love that they would use dialects and accent a lot more to clearly distinguish where people are from, instead of having just an amalgamation of British and American actors that speak differently from each other, and being a bit more clearly of saying, like, no, he is definitely from there in this world, and he's definitely from there in this world. And things like that.
That's always a struggle with anything that's been another medium before, because everyone, your mental picture of how it should be is going to be different from every other reader of that series. So there's always going to be,
yes and no. well, my opinion of everything except for the original material is that it's fan fiction. Because then it's a lot easier to accept all the flaws in it. I can still enjoy Wheel of Time a lot because it's fan fiction. It's just someone else who have adopted the thing I love.
Yeah,
Hopefully
someone
they
who had
love
money
it.
to make the pictures inside their head come to life, so other people could see it.
But there's small things like the ogre is supposed to be like a giant, or at least impressively tall, and he's not really, like, he's 7 feet something instead of massive. Or maybe that's just
So
how he
he's
was in
just-
my head.
He's just Norwegian.
Almost, yeah. And there's like other small things, like the design of things, and like I said, the accent they're using. Like, honestly, this might tickle you, Andy, a bit. So the two rivers are very much founded on where the main characters from are founded on sort of the quintessential village of bowyers in England.
Right.
But the best bowyers in the English army were always the Welsh.
Welsh, yeah.
So, of course, the two rivers should have a Welsh accent. That should have been the right way of doing it.
And
Right?
that's getting ultra niche and ultra nerdy on people who would pick up on that, though.
Yeah, but, I mean, yes, there are not that many Welsh people. But it should be possible to have just, with luck, you should be able to either find enough or to teach the really good ones to have an accent that you will blend in and make that world over there.
Yeah.
And that there's things in the Wheel of Time do a lot of things really, really well. They have a really, really ethnically vast base of actors covering almost everything. And it's also, they are playing up to how the book are describing people as well. Not like the book describe ethnic people, but it's more like, oh, she has like this hairstyle and this look, so they're adopting that. And like, so they take someone who to me looked clearly like they have Indian origins, Native American origins, and put that into that character. They take like South Asian people and put into there. They take the Japanese and put into there, and they do all of these things, which makes it really interesting when you think about. This is minor spoiler if you haven't read the book, but there comes an invasion from across the sea to the west, and how they will speak, because that's a big point in the book, that they speak the same language, but the dialect and accent that's so different that it's hard to understand until you're exposed to it a lot. And their culture and their ethnicity should be way different than what we have over here, because they've been separated for X number of thousand years. So yes, I'm really, really nerding out about those minor details in things, but that would be fun.
I love that sort of stuff, though. Is like you say,
It's things like
the
that.
little details.
Yeah. Because for me, it's like things like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I mean, I grew up on the books and the TV series. TV series more than the radio show. And then, the film came out with Martin Freeman. And for me, it was just so much. It's a great film. Yeah, he's a great actor. Yeah, it's a nicely produced film.
Alan Rickman is perfectly cast yet again.
There's just so much wrong with that film. For me, for my dozens of readings of the books and the multiple times of watching the TV series.
If you look at all the source material and the differences between them, there are differences between the radio series, the books, and the TV series.
Yep.
And complete mental blank on
Don't let me distract you.
on his name. Author,
Douglas Adams.
Douglas Adams. Thank you.
Yep.
Because I've just been thinking about the Philip Pullman stuff, because that's another one that's been really brilliantly done.
Yeah, that's also good.
Where they decided they were going to do all 3 books, but the Dave said all 6 books. We'll get onto the Salmon Doubt in a bit. But
that's not a Hitchhiker's.
It was Hitchhikers going across to Dirk Gently and vice versa. He couldn't make his mind up before he died. That's why it reads now like Dirk Gently. But yeah, Douglas Adams did do work on the screenplay for the film.
Yeah.
So his changes to that were to make it more film friendly in case they didn't progress to get any of the other books made.
Yeah, and I knew that and I understood that, but it's also things like, maybe casting choices. Martin Freeman is short,
Yeah.
whereas Arthur Dent is tall. It's like Jack Reacher. Yeah, Jack Reacher in the books is 6'3", 270 pounds of solid muscle, Norwegian, sort of Scandinavian, French heritage, not 5'4" dark-haired Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
fair enough.
The Jack Reacher films, great films, just changed the name. Yeah, they're not Jack Reacher.
I mean, there's so much media that's like that, though, isn't there? There's so many casting choices in various things. You could write off half of Hollywood for not being applicable to anything if you based on all the source material it's taken from.
Yeah, but getting certain things right. Yeah, I think is perhaps quite important.
But again, that gets back to, I know we're dragging Rasmus on for longer than he wants to be, but tough shit.
I still have food and drinks.
Yeah, he's got food.
Fed and watered, that's close enough. But that's looping back around to that thing again, isn't it? That everyone's mental picture of what they're hoping it's going to be is going to be different. And no matter how many people you do please, there is always going to be a significant proportion of people that aren't going to be pleased by that, in some way or another.
Yeah. I think I'd like to see somebody taking Hitchhikers on as a TV series and do the whole, not just do the first, do the trilogy. Yeah, all
do the 5-part trilogy.
Yeah,
and then
so you've got your robot, your cricket robots, and you've got the new planet, the new Earth. Yeah, you've got all those sort of things. I think it could be, particularly with modern CGI, it could be apt, and do it as a serious piece of work rather than I felt the film was perhaps trying to be too comedic, and so that Heart of Gold, it wasn't this amazingly glorious ship, it was kind of more comical. So I'd like to see
I can sort of see why they did that, because especially for if you look at the influence, Douglas Adams had the first Apple Macintosh in the UK.
Yeah.
And Stephen Fry had the second. Stephen Fry was the narrator in the film, and Heart of Gold has a very, very, very Apple-y aesthetic to it of when it was made, and it's got that kind of feel to it. I think if it was maybe made now, if Douglas Adams was still alive and they made it now rather than 2005 or whenever it was made, it would perhaps look more sleek and metallic rather than
slightly comical,
a white ball.
Yeah.
I think it's that design aesthetic, the design influence of what mattered a lot to them. They were hugely in the Apple scene. It's always the way, though, isn't it? You look at pirate culture, everything we know about, or everything we think we know about pirates is from media. It's interpretive at best. It's only whether or not it's interpreted how you wish it to be as to whether or not you tend to enjoy something.
Well, as Rasmus said earlier, it's essentially anything beyond the original is a fan fiction.
Yeah, absolutely,
and that's okay. I mean, if for those who are really into kind of Marvel and DC, most Marvel films and DC films, make huge mistakes compared to the original canon material, and people accept that. Well, I was never
like
really
Hela
that into
being
the comics. Yeah.
Like Hela not being the daughter of Loki and things like that. on that note, actually, so the Norse mythology is really weird in a lot of ways, but it's like the actual Norse mythology. But it's one thing that it does way different from all the other mythologies, so to speak, is that all of the characters are human. Like they have god powers, but they are humans with human flaws. And not like the Greek and Roman mythology where you have these divine beings who have divine powers and also do things, but they're still like supreme in all of the ways.
I think it's safe to say if you look at Greek and Roman mythology, it is generally don't put your penis in that. Oh well, you put your penis in that.
Yeah,
everything's gone to shit.
Whereas in Norse mythology, it's a lot more of different groups of people interacting. You have the Aesir and the Vala and the Aegir. No, I think there's 3 of them. Sorry.
No.
The Nornir. Yeah, you played Valhalla. You know this. Yeah,
exactly.
And sort of the dynamics between them and them themselves being ethnically different group of people. But all of the gods themselves are people and probably based upon real people, but with excellent talents in things.
Yeah.
So, sort of making superheroes out of them is really, really weird to me. Also because it's a lot of my culture and they get so many things blatantly wrong. Yeah. Like Thor suddenly being a state of being and an honorific instead of a person. And you have a horse-headed figure who suddenly becomes Thor, and you have a frog that becomes Thor, and things like that, which the Marvel universe did.
But
also in the sense that like they were all people. It's all about people problems, just galactic things on a bigger scale. But in the sense that they all make mistakes, and they're all very much fallible. They're not like the Romans and the Greek. That I think my point was, where they just do shit and then just don't try to fix it. They're all like these supreme beings that just hover around and do things. And it's more or less the story of the demigods or their kids. If that makes sense. But when it comes to Loki, like he was the father of Hela, the goddess of hell, or the afterlife, of Jormungandr, the great worm that circled the earth, and Fenrir, the wolf. He's also the mother of Sleipnir, Odin's horse. I don't know if you recall it. So in the mythology is that you have this giant, which you encounter in Valhalla, who comes to the Aesir, and who promised to build them a wall against the Jotnur. And in exchange, and they make a bet with him because the gods are like they think they can get something for free by making an impossible bet. But of course, him himself being magical and having abilities and having his own horse with great powers, he's able to build this wall within the time frame and the conditions they set. When the gods then see that he's about to win his bet and they need to pay him whatever it was the thing, they convince Loki to steal his horse. Now Loki being Loki, he decides that he transforms himself into a mare to tempt the stallion of this builder. And then of course he ends up coming back after X number of months with an 8-legged horse that he gives as a gift, a foal, 8-legged foal that he gives to Odin as a gift. And the story goes, of course, that we know that he turned into a mare. We know this is his child. We don't need to talk about what happened in between.
So, interestingly enough, my dad's a musician and has had a band called Strider for as long as I've been alive, pretty much. And part of their logo is the 8-legged horse.
Ah,
Mm.
cool.
Done in a sort of a Celtic-y style.
That's fun stuff.
Random
Sort of.
sideline.
Yeah. I mean, the Vikings also had the mythology of a ship that the undead would take up from hell that was made out of nail clippings and hair. I don't recall what this was called at the moment, but that was a thing.
I'm pretty certain I've been on that.
Yeah. Oh,
Because I've got my
in
on
the
my
Viking vein.
part of my
in the Viking,
reading pile there is Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology book. So that's kind of
and it's actually really, really good.
Good.
They're like it's not it's a complete mythology of only the stories of the gods, but it's not a complete Norse tales, so to speak.
yeah.
Because there's so many of our legends today are based upon like the Snorri Saga and the Edda, like these legends of actual people of actual people and kings, which apparently to the Icelandic reads like contemporary fiction because the language hasn't changed much.
Of course, yeah, it hasn't. It's yeah. I mean, I realised that we listen to both the same selection.
Illusionist,
podcasts.
yeah, they did.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
first episode on Icelandic language recently.
Yeah.
And one of the Icelandic words that really stuck with me is their name for the computer, which is I need to double check what it actually is, but it's based on number and volva. Volva being the name for the witch or the seer of the village, and so you have the number, which is the computer. But I'll see what the actual name is.
What about you, Andy? What's been grabbing your attention while we've sidelined together?
My attention this week, I'm still one of the naughty ones who's still working on their Fools of Tools.
Oh,
you're only doing that to
to
make everyone else feel better who is
Yeah.
sort of like, you're doing your duty.
Yeah, particularly Steve. Yeah. But there's a reason for that. I'll come back to the reason why I'm a bit delayed in a moment. Another podcast recommendation, which fits in with our episode tonight. 3 Northern Makers.
Well, yeah, I heard of it.
It's about 20 something episodes so far. Started earlier this year, after we did, so they've got slightly fewer episodes than we have.
Copycats.
It's 2 guys, 2 Swedes, and a guy from the north of England, Steve Bell, Andy from Potato Works, and Pierre, the Swedish maker. Mostly woodworking. They talk a lot about kind of woodworking.
Boring.
Steve's just bought himself a laser, so that's quite interesting. But nice chat. It's nice kind of about an hour-ish, some a bit shorter, a couple a bit longer. They've had a couple of guests. So it's kind of that three guys together chatting about their life. So it's a kind of similar kind of ilk to, I don't know, Reclaimed Audio or something like that. So you've kind of got those. Well, what have you done this week? What problems have you had? What are you trying to sort of solve? And so it's a nice listen. They're 3 nice guys, and yeah, there's no BS. There's no showing off particularly. I mean, they've got some nice bits of kit between them. Yeah, there's at least 2 shapers and 2 dominoes, big laser. But they just seem really nice guys. If you like, kind of just listening to 3 guys just kind of week on week chatting amongst themselves. It's a nice little listen. They're just 3 ordinary blokes who like to make. So that's quite a sort of a good one. Rasmus's video this week that came out this week was a good watch as well. Certainly recommend that. The hospital on top of a hill. That's
mountain, please.
Yeah, it's a hill. Yeah, it is a mountain. Yeah, 5 or 6 hours climb. Even I'll admit that's a mountain. Yeah.
Yeah,
worth a watch. Nice sort of documentary. 25 minutes. Really nice piece of work.
Thank you.
And the other one, I was a bit late getting the audio out for Dave Bauer's episode this week.
What have you been preoccupied with?
What have I been preoccupied with? Well, a week last Friday, I had a call, a message from an ex-colleague, a friend of mine, who sort of said, school he's at is a bit stuck for a couple of hours of physics teaching. So he said, might you be able to help out? And I said, well, I might be able to. I need more details. What have you got in mind? Monday, I had a message saying, could you come in on Wednesday and teach a lesson and have a chat with somebody from senior management? I said, yeah, okay. And then late Monday night, I had an email saying, could you fill out this form and give us some references by the end of play tomorrow? So I did all that, planned this lesson, went in on Wednesday afternoon, had over an hour of interviews, which is quite a long time for teaching interviews. Teaching interviews tend to be kind of quite a lengthy affair. They're normally at least half a day, but that's because you get a tour of the school, you have to do a lesson, and then there's normally kind of a bit of free time while you're rotating around having interviews with the head teacher or whoever. So they're normally at least half a day. I've had full day interviews, and certainly you normally find out by the end of the day. So I think I had to get there there just after 1 o'clock, and I left just after 4 o'clock. So but I was the only one. I have no idea how it went. I haven't heard from them, which might be good news. It might, just because they might just be waiting on stuff. It was their end of term, so they may have been busy. It might mean that I haven't got it at all. But it was it was a change. I haven't been in the classroom for quite a few years, as most people listening know. So it was good to get back in the classroom. Wasn't the best of lessons. There were certainly some faults. Timing was one, because there was no obvious clock. The watch I've been wearing for the past few months, you have to touch to sort of see the screen, and you can't really go around just doing that in a lesson, so there are quick glances at the times. My timing was a bit out, but yeah, I delivered. I wouldn't have been, if it was my regular class on a regular day, I would have been quite happy with it. Interview lesson, maybe not quite polished enough. I don't know, but could be a couple of hours teaching till the end of the summer, or the end of the summer term. So it'd be nice if I can get it. If I don't, it's no big deal. It's mostly about helping a ex-colleague friend out because they've got a bit of a tricky situation. But I was kind of hoping I'd be able to say, oh yeah, I've got a job from January, but at the moment I don't know.
Oh yeah, you've had an interview which you haven't done in a while, so it's a nice step forward, which is good. Yeah,
so that took a few of my podcast listening hours. Get me pulled back from Rasmus. It meant audio came out late last week, and it meant I didn't really get to do anything on my Fools with Tools last week. So rather than finishing and getting it sent off on Saturday, didn't happen. So hopefully next couple of days, and it'll get sent off first class.
I mean, you're still not later than John D. Harvey was last year, so
yeah. So yeah, it'll arrive by the end of next week, before the weekend. But I can't say who to, because that would spoil it.
Would.
And there's still about there are still about 30-ish that are, I think it's a bit over 30 that are either not sent or are in transit.
Yeah, mine is still in transit.
Out of about 90 people that took part. So
that's not too bad. You've got a little bit of time to not feel too bad then.
Yeah. It'll arrive before Christmas.
That's the important bit.
At least I haven't got to battle European customs houses this year.
True.
Jamie, what about you?
I've had a really productive few. Well, actually, I've been pretty busy all week. I've been printing some 3D printing some parts for a Dalek of all pieces.
Big one,
full size one. Yeah, it's a guy he's building one. He's nearly finished actually, but reprinting a couple of parts just to tweak how they've been printed. So that's been sort of an ongoing thing, but he's on about possibly making a second one. So there might be a lot more printing again in my future for him. So a little bit of that, and then I took Thursday, Friday, and then I've got tomorrow off the day job So I've just been trying to get ahead of the game in kind of getting some jobs ticked off and fitted a smart thermostat and just little bits and bobs, sorting stuff out, a bit of sorting out in the workshop, making my leather working space kind of nice and tidy again and accessible, and sorting shelving out and grouping tools into the right places and things like that, instead of trying to spend 20 minutes trying to find one thing that you need to do a 2-minute job with and kind of thing. So because what normally happens is my Christmas shutdown at work is like 2 weeks, but that includes Christmas and New Year, so you only really get kind of like a couple of days to decompress, then Christmas happens, then you get a couple of days where you can't really do anything, the New Year happens, and then you're back at work again. So I always sort of have these fantastic intentions of I'm going to use the 2 weeks to do loads of stuff, and then don't. So I'm trying to just get a load of stuff done before Christmas while I've still got some leave left to take from work, get jobs ticked off and things, and then I can actually hopefully get some stuff done for fun over Christmas. So I've been doing that. Got a little bit more to do tomorrow. But in and amongst all of that, I did also watch. It was a recent video by Veritasium talking about electricity and how our definition of it might not be what it should be.
Yeah.
Which was a very interesting and controversial video, but Electroboom did an amazing follow-up and breakdown of it, which if anyone's seen the Veritasium video, you have to watch the Electroboom follow-up, because he makes it accessible to human brains instead of the non-human Veritasium explanation of it that, although very eloquent and very beautifully done, Electroboom goes into the other prerequisite knowledge that you need to comprehend what Veritasium is saying, and how it might not necessarily be as clear cut as he was explaining.
Yeah, the Veritasium one went a little bit above my head, but it's also sort of explained sort of what's actually going on. And to me, it also sort of explained why you would have a voltage drop over certain lengths, because there's actually loss of energy being consumed along the way.
Well, so this is the thing. So the Electroboom one, he explains how that actually works in the sense of what's actually going on in the circuit, and how the wires themselves, the reason why you get that loss is because the wires themselves are acting like both capacitors and resistors. So he actually shows the breakdown of how that works and how you can graph out what happens in that. If you were to take that 300,000 kilometer loop of wire that Veritasium was talking about, if you were to break that down, and he actually does a proper modeled version of it and shows what happens when you break those circuits out into the components and how they would actually work in terms of capacitance, resistance, inductance, and things like that. And it's a very, very, very good rational way of understanding what's going on. And
it's also a great example of physics, communication, and understanding.
Exactly that.
Particularly in terms of what is actually needed at particular levels. So,
but it's really difficult to know how much your audience knows and know how to speak to them so they understand something that.
But also,
actually
what the
is way above their
audience
head.
needs to know.
Yeah.
So the kind of the conventional model of electricity that is taught in every school at kind of I'm using UK terms, GCSE level, A level, up to age 18, and even into kind of physics and engineering at university level, to a certain extent, is perfectly suitable and perfectly adequate. But then if you want to really dig deep into what's actually happening, then yes, you do need to understand things like Poynting vectors and the like. But you don't need to understand Poynting vectors to have a good working knowledge and understanding of electricity for the majority of people who use electrical things. And having that kind of model doesn't it may not be fully correct, but it's not necessarily completely wrong either.
Yeah. And it's where, the average person's kind of, progression from, like, this is electricity, it goes zap. At level 1 of, touch socket, it hurt finger, to pointing vectors at level 10. You might learn level 1, 2, 3, 4, and then Veritasium's jump straight to like level 10.
Yeah.
Here's the theoretical potential of what's going on. So the Electroboom video kind of gives you the 6 steps in between of like, here's why this, and then here's how we can see why this, and then here's getting back to things. Oh, now we're at things that you know and understand.
Yeah.
And then walks back through it again. So it's kind of
I just looked up the video and I'll watch it tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a great kind of infill for the people who might not necessarily ever need to learn about pointing vectors, but do want to know more than touch socket finger hurt. Kind of, it's the filler for nerds basically.
And it's interesting to see the different. There's been quite a few response videos by a number of different people. Quite a few by kind of electronics guys, electronic engineers.
Yeah, Big Clive did one as well,
and they've taken a slightly different approach to the explanation. Mm-hmm. And again, that's the sort of thing that happens in a physicist will have a slightly different interpretation of the same thing that a chemist will do, and will have a slightly different interpretation that an electronic engineer will do, and they're actually all looking at exactly the same thing, just from a different set of lenses. And
so, I mean, it's fan fiction at the end of the day, isn't it? It's
yeah.
Because
I mean, another sort of good example is things like just the structure of matter. Mm-hmm. Atoms, particles, molecules. And then sort of treating atoms as well. Let's treat them like a ball type thing, and they'll have this kind of slightly more detailed model where we've got kind of this nucleus of these particles in the middle called neutrons and protons, and around the outside we've got these other particles called electrons zooming around and about, and then you kind of they're not actually particles,
and they're not actually really zooming around like that,
and they're not actually in one place.
The electron shell model is not quite right.
More of a cloud, and the things in the middle, they're not actually the things. There's other component parts. There's these things called quarks, or quarks, depending on who you want to listen to.
How wrong you want to pronounce
it. Well, I mean, there's that's another kind of debate for an interesting one. Yeah.
But I mean, I suppose what we should do at this point,
GIF and GIF.
There is no. There are people who pronounce it wrong, and then sensible humans. The creator is wrong. He can say GIF all he wants, but he's not correct. It is a graphics interchange format, not a giraffics interchange format. If you're going to label letters, it's pronounced the way it's labeled. Yeah, that's a rant for another day.
I think you've done that rant a couple of times before anyway.
Yeah, and he's always wrong, weirdly enough.
But sort of to finish things off, I remembered, it took me a while to remember what it was called, but Douglas Adams did one last talk before he died that is called Parrots to Universe and Everything. And it's very much Douglas Adams, and it's very hilarious, and it's very fascinating.
I think I might have heard that.
I'm not sure if I have, but I will check it out, and I'll put a link so I can find it.
I'll send you the link.
Yeah, I'll pop it into the show notes for people to listen to.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah. Before we round off, just remind people that next week is our episode 30. And as has will become our tradition, every 10th episode we'll have a group chat. So we'll have next week we've got previous. We'll try and pull in previous guests for these group chats. So Next week we've got Dave Bauer,
Who's in the chat.
guest from last week and is in the chat. We've got Andy Berkey and Steve House and Ali from Geeky Fay Art. And we're going to be talking about art and crafts. So that's going to be
Messy.
hopefully an interesting chat. Yes, messy could be the right word.
Carnage.
I
That's
think
what I'm expecting.
could be fun. Yes. I think we'll just sit back and watch.
Sit on
just
mute. People watching the video will just see us chuckling.
Throw the occasional spanner in the works to see what kind of effect that has.
Pull them with a stick to keep them going and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
General plan.
As long as we get
so
at least one
that's going to be a good
insult
chat.
in, that'll be the main thing.
Yeah. So looking forward to that for a good chat.
Oh, come on. I'm almost going at the point now that I've stopped listening for when Steve is going to go on, and that's spiffing. I'm just waiting for when's the insult going to hit, just so I can get it out of the way.
We did realise the other day that we'd got right near the end of one of our episodes and hadn't actually mentioned you. So we just had to throw in, and we need to insult Rasmus. Because it had been a traditional thing that at least once in every episode you've come under fire.
Was that with Ellen?
I think Ellen might have got an insult in early doors. Might have been.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Anyway, I
You
listened
go
to that.
back and listen to them. Yeah. Rasmus, where can people find you if they want to find more of your work and you?
Rasmus Loen. All of the places. From YouTube to Instagram. And everywhere else in between that people think is social. So, yeah.
And we should
Apart
also
from
say
Twitter.
that
Your Twitter's pretty limited.
Yeah, I have a Twitter account. I never really got it. It just seemed like a people for shout and journalists to interact. So it's like, meh.
That's not far wrong with Twitter, to be honest.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, it's also shouting on Facebook and Instagram, but it's at least shouting with pictures, and that's easier to understand for me.
And shouting with as long a message as you want.
Also.
Yeah, and you a bit more control maybe with Facebook and Instagram in some ways, I think. But yeah,
we should also
pictures on
say
Instagram.
for people who've enjoyed the sound of Rasmus's voice this evening, that they should absolutely go and check out the two-thirds
have
focus
themselves
podcast.
checked in. Is that what you're trying to say?
We've so far had two-thirds focused on the podcast.
Yeah, you're just missing Jan, I think.
Just Jan now.
Yeah, we've had Red. Yeah, so we'll get Jan on at some point. Hopefully,
it's on the list.
Should.
some point in 2022. Indeed.
Sounds good.
And then maybe a two-thirds focused. We could become what?
4/5 focused.
5/5. Yeah.
I think to be fair, it's probably still going to be 2/5 focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe one of the group ones next year. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Right, on that note, I'll say goodbye.
Yeah.
I guess you two
Good
can
night, folks.
Bye-bye.